the line, closes it out, and the Cubs show a lot of grit today, rallying from 1-0, 3-1, 5-3, and 6-5, and win it 8-6.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley, live in studio on a Monday here on BK and Ferrario. That's what it sounded like over the weekend. Boys, we all thought the Cardinals were going to take 2 out of 3 against the Chicago Cubs since the last time we talked.
Yeah.
Idiots.
Can I amend my thoughts on that, if that's all right? Can we go back in time?
Why the hell did we fall for that?
I know, I fell for it. I fell for it just because of a week of the Cardinals being good. Unbelievable.
They didn't do that. They lost all 3 games that they have played since the last time that we all had a discussion about this team. And, hey, I think the season was probably already over. Is there anybody in our audience, and I would love to hear from you today if there is, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line, and the mic drop feature. Go ahead and send in a mic drop if you want. Is on the 101 ESPN app. Is there anybody out there that still has any amount of hope whatsoever for this team?
Anybody out there?
The answer's no, right? This was the official end of the season. We've had 17 unofficial endings, including, starting 10 and 24 to the season. But this was it, right? You are 44 and 56 through the first 100 games of the season.
12 games under 500. You could still do it.
You're 11 games back in the division. You're 10 games back in the wild card. The only National League team right now with more losses than the Cardinals are the Nationals and the Rockies, both of whom came into the season expecting to lose.
Rockies just sold a bullpen piece to the Braves.
We're done, right? We can finish those conversations about what if the Cardinals, that's over, right?
Yeah. It was over for me the moment that Alec Burleson was pumping those arms to get to a pop fly and missed it. That's when I said, yep, that'll do. Or maybe it was Jordan Montgomery giving up 7 runs in the first 3 innings. That might do also.
He battled yesterday. Yeah. Give him credit.
Did he?
Yeah, well, he got through 6.
That's like saying
it's a quality start if we adjusted it.
It's like saying Willson Contreras battled behind the plate
by not giving him one of the runs that he gave up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you squint, wasn't that bad.
You don't even have to squint. You need to wear like those
drunk goggles.
Those goggles that your grandparents buy from Walgreens that like go across your entire face. You need to wear those.
Yeah.
So, the Cardinals on Friday, that was the game that I really want to hone in on, because they had a real shot in that one. And then the umpire makes a bad call, and they're in a situation, that was Friday's game, right? In the 8th inning? Yeah. They're in a situation where you've got the bases loaded, you've got Alec Burleson at the plate. I don't want to really get into the discussion of whether or not it was the right call. I thought it was right, but I think it was 50-50 either way with Gorman versus Burleson in that spot. Ultimately, the umpire took the bat out of Alec Burleson's hands. He grounds into that double play. And for me, that was the play, guys, that I'm going to remember that really put an end to any of this discussion. Because earlier that day, I didn't believe it, but I could at least give you the devil's advocate reason as to why, hey, maybe you should buy in. Maybe there is reason to believe that the Cardinals could get back into this thing. You looked at the schedule, you saw the Cubbies on the schedule for the next 3, and then you had 4 more coming up. You have the Diamondbacks who have been going through it a little bit lately. If you squint and you look a little to the right, you could say to yourself, you know what, I could believe in this team. Montgomery's pitching really well. Flaherty's been better lately. The bullpen's kind of starting to right the ship. Arenado looks like an MVP candidate again. Goldie's been awesome. You're getting Tyler O'Neill back. Maybe that helps your defense in the outfield. Carlson's been playing better. Like, you could talk yourself into it. And then Gorman gets hurt. They have that play by Burleson where it's the double play ball to finish out that inning. You have 3 pitchers over the weekend that went a combined 17 innings and gave up a combined 14 earned runs. And then, boom. In one weekend at Wrigley, it was over. Just over for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, I really don't even know if there was a specific moment for me. I think it was just the entire weekend in itself, to where you would get so close to winning and then you would just lose. Like, you would drop it. You had a couple of runs where you were able to get close to it. You've had guys in runners in scoring position, bases loaded, and you leave the guys on base. It was just the depleted moment after every game, and we said it last week, to where you felt like the Cardinals had this built up in them where they were like, okay, yeah, now we're believing. Now we're going to go on a run and take it up to the deadline and show everybody wrong. And one bad game, which Friday for you, was the punch in the gut that said, yep, this is who we are. And I've never felt more sorry for Nolan Arenado than yesterday, watching that guy run out a ball up the middle of the infield.
He was busting his ass yesterday.
On a bum ankle. He's been making plays all week. And he's the one that said there's still plenty to play for. And he's the guy that basically was the only offense that provided for the Cardinals in that game.
Is it just me, or does it feel like this team lets one loss become 5 way too often?
Yeah, reminds you of the Blues, doesn't
it's
it?
The head dip.
Snowballs.
It's the head dip. One thing happens, and then it's like, oh, geez, yep, we are a bad team. And then you lose the confidence again.
You guys remember that game that they lost against San Francisco?
Which one?
Oh, fair. The one with that they got... It all went to hell at the end of it with Gio, right? That to me was when I officially kind of turned the page to 2024. I didn't feel like they were going to be able to get out of that sluggish spot in their schedule. That was like the end of that stretch. But they had lost one against KC, that Mike Myers game. They got swept against the Pirates. Then they lose 2 out of 3 against Texas, 2 out of 3 against Cincy, and then get swept completely against San Francisco. These stretches of games where they just can't seem to find themselves at all, that's going to end up being the undoing of the season. And it all comes back to one thing: pitching. They just never had the pitching. Guys, you looked at it over the weekend. If they were a little deeper in the bullpen, I think they probably would have won 2 out of 3 this weekend. But they don't have the arms. And it goes back to the offseason. Time and time again, their issues today showed up over the offseason. Willson Contreras. Man, I liked the signing. Alex, you were calling for it all offseason. You said that would be the number 1 target you would have. He would be the guy. I think Willson Contreras has been exactly what they signed him to be. Now, let me explain this a little bit. I don't think they realized what they were signing, or they didn't think enough at the time about what they were signing. He's been a good offensive catcher that's been below average defensively. Guess what he's been for his entire major league career? That. They were way too late on the trigger of deciding, you know what, we could probably use some more bullpen arms. How many times did we mention, hey, Matt Moore, Andrew Chafin, these guys aren't going to break the bank, but they could really help you. Well, they decided, no, you know what? We're good with what we've got. We got Wilking Rodriguez, a Rule 5 pick, who they genuinely believed this is going to be the guy that makes it work for us. Anthony Masevich, who at the first moment that they could drop him, they dropped his ass.
Didn't they pay money from Kansas City to get him instead of paying money to sign Andrew Chafin?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't like $7-8 million. But yeah, beside the point, yeah, I'll go with you on that, Alex.
I saw cash, and they weren't willing to throw cash at Chafin.
We even had to DFA a guy on his birthday to get Masevich on the roster.
How about signing Ryan Tepera, then DFAing him 2 days later to bring up Kyle Leahy, who pitched 1 game and blew up, and then they DFA'd him. Yeah, that was good.
All of these decisions that they made in the offseason that left them kind of one spot short in the rotation, 1 spot short in the bullpen, they're all leading to what we're watching right now. They just never had the pitching, and it was never going to work as a result. I also don't think that they adjusted to the rules quick enough. All offseason, they told us when we went to winter warm-up, I remember talking to Mo and Ollie, and they're like, yeah, I don't think it's going to have as big of an effect as people think.
We played the audio when you were out.
Yeah, Mo had a cut on the opening drive on the first day of the season, before opening day, and he said, yeah, I don't think they're going to impact us much. What?
Hey, Mo! I think the rules matter, man. I think the shifts, the limitations, it's going to matter for us.
And you pitched to contact.
No team pitches to contact more than the St. Louis Cardinals. And they were like, yeah, no, that's going to be fine.
And I also like how it took them up to the Major League Baseball draft of 2023 to decide that we should probably change our thinking on pitchers in our system.
I still love how we've fallen in love with Taylor Motter.
Well,
we're going to get to that. Give it.
We have not. Yeah. Is any of this starting to make you a little... I don't know.
Makes you feel good about this offseason,
queasy about this offseason that John Mozeliak, who says he knows how to run a roster, is going to overhaul it?
Hey, his track record's pretty good.
We are a week away from the trade deadline, Alex. His entire goal was what? They're going to acquire what?
Pitching.
How do you feel about that? Not great. In the words of John Mozeliak.
He said he's going to change the model. It makes me feel better. We're going to get swing and miss.
Changed the model when he brought back Taylor Meyer.
I don't even know what to say about this team anymore.
At the end of the day.
Well, it is the end of the day. It is
stuff.
The end of the day because
the end
Cubs.
of the road is what it is.
Although we come.
I really compared this team to the 2013 Cardinals.
Well, you compared them to the 2004 Cardinals.
No, Alex.
They got
you
the
always
pitching
say
of the
that.
04 Cardinals.
Yeah, they got the
have
pitching. They don't have the
Outside of
offense.
Carpenter before he got hurt.
They don't have the defense either. That's something that I probably overlooked too much. I didn't realize how bad Jordan Walker was going to be defensively, guys. That's on me. I should have known better.
Give him a break. It's his first year.
It is, and maybe he'll end up being okay, but when you put together this pitching staff and this defense, there's only so much you can do with the offense, man. The offense has been top 10. It's been fine.
Cardinals should have attempted that thing that baseball told us not to do, which was like bring an outfielder in to create a shift and then kind of shift them around a little bit. Like, it may have helped us a little bit.
I think they should focus on getting talented pitchers.
Yeah,
That would probably help some of their
too.
defense. Here's the thing, you don't need to worry about your defense being good or bad if the ball misses the bat.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because if the bat doesn't hit
Ollie's
the
been
ball,
saying that for about a year and a half now.
Yeah.
Did you know what John Mozeliak heard? Look at my track record. I win with contact.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You guys can watch us, by the way, on the 101 ESPN YouTube page at 101 ESPN STL. Troll or text, guys.
Troll.
Less than a week ago, you all were comparing this team to the 2011 Cardinals. This is St. Louis soft serve media.
Who is comparing this team to the 2011 Cardinals?
Well,
Did you guys do that while I was out?
No. You were here last week.
The morning show even said they can't do that. So, no.
Last week, the one thing that I did say, I'll take ownership of it, and I put the prerequisite on it of, hey, I don't believe this, but you could look at the schedule, you could find a way to convince yourself that, hey, maybe the Cardinals could find a way to get like 5 games back by the deadline. That's what I said. And if that happened, would you still sell? That was the question that we entertained here on the show. And we all said yes. We all said this team cannot be trusted because they do not have the pitching. So no, you can't compare this team to 2011. You can compare it to 2007. That's the team that you can compare it to.
Yeah, but imagine the type of pitching they're going to get at the trade deadline for the pieces that you don't want anymore.
It's going to be great.
2024 is going to be filled with talent.
Imagine what they're going to get for Paul DeYoung. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley and Dylan Carlson when they trade him too, even though that's going to make all of you very, very mad.
And Willson Contreras.
Hey, speaking of pitching, Adam Wainwright is here to save the day, ladies and gentlemen.
Da-da-da-da!
We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
Weekday morning starting at 7. It's the opening drive with Randy Carricker, Brooke Grimsley, and Super Bowl champion Carrie Davis, getting you in the know first on everything St. Louis sports. From the Blues, Cards, and more. Kickstart your morning with the opening drive weekday mornings from 7 to 10 on 101 ESPN.
Brought to you by Sumner One.
Look for John Deere savings this Friday and Saturday at the St. Louis Premium Outlets from 10 to 6.
Brett Michaels, hot off the stadium tour, now brings you Party Gras 2023 with special appearances by former Journey singer Steve Augeri, Mark McGrath from Sugar Ray, plus special guests Night Ranger and Jefferson Starship. This Friday night, Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. Tickets are on sale now at livenation.com. Don't miss Party Gras 2023, part of the Allegiant Always concert series.
Hey, it's Matt and Leslie Holiday. When we got to St. Louis, it wasn't long before we started searching for a way to give back.
We visited Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital, and we knew this is where we belonged.
Homers for Health has been going strong for 12 years and made such an unbelievable impact on the hospital. I've won a World Series and been inducted to the Cardinals Hall of Fame, but I consider the work we have done at Cardinal Glennon to be my greatest achievement.
Please make your pledge for patients today at homersforhealth.org. Your support truly does matter. Presented by Heartland, Coca-Cola, and Chick-fil-A.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my insurance agent, Tracy Bibb, and her team. She is the best when it comes to your insurance coverage, and you need the best when it comes to driving your vehicle around, or if it comes to your house, where making sure that there's no issues, all the rain that we continue to get. You don't need some type of flooding. You don't need a fender bender on the side of the highway. And if it happens, you want to make sure that somebody is there for you. And Tracy Bibb and her team are always there for you. The customer service is at its best. They preach all the time. It's not a matter of if something happens, it's when it happens. And when it does, you call them up, you tell them what took place. Tracy and her team will take it from there. Plus, they're always keeping you in the loop of what your insurance coverage details, making sure that the prices, if they're going up, what that covers, and if you need to look around and find things, Tracy Bibb is always in the loop with you. So give her a call today. Get a free quote from Tracy Bibb, non-committal, super simple. You give her a call, 314-328-4260. Tell her Alex Ferrario was talking about it, and that's where you heard it. She'll take it from there. 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in good hands with the Bibb.
You know, he and I have chatted. You know, he certainly wants to come back and pitch. He really wants to prove he can do this. But there's a physical element to this. And, you know, out of respect for what he's done for this organization, we're certainly going to try to allow for that to happen. But we also have to be realistic. If it's not going to happen, then, you know, that page may have to be turned.
So that was Sean Mozeliak about 2 weeks ago saying, hey, if it's not going to happen, that page may have to be turned on Adam Wainwright. 2 weeks later, Adam Wainwright's starting again for the St. Louis Cardinals. Yes. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, that changed quick. He was supposed to have a simulated game over the weekend, and then the Cardinals had to use Dakota Hudson more than they wanted to, had to use, I would assume, Zach Thompson a little more than they wanted to. And guess what? Simulated game put on hold. No. We're going to get 60 pitches from Adam Wainwright on the road down in Arizona.
That's like a simulated game. Arizona hasn't been any good this season.
Alex, Adam Wainwright's telling everybody that'll listen, he's fixed. Everything's all better now. No, the last few times that I've told you this, don't look at that. No. Look over here. Now I am actually fixed. Remember last year, Alex, when he told us, hey, it was just a mechanical thing. I fixed it, and now going into the playoffs when he was supposed to start that deciding game 3, apparently, I'm going to be all better now. Nope, wasn't fixed. Came into the offseason. I'm all fixed now. You should pay me $17 million. Cardinals decided to do exactly that. Gets into spring training. Goes down to the World Baseball Classic. Nope. He's overcompensating because he's still not completely right. Then he gets back again. He's healthy. Nope, not healthy. He overcompensates with his shoulder now instead of his leg because he's still not completely healthy. Well, now this time, well, he's got a 7.7 ERA in his 11 starts this year. Now he's going to be the guy that ends up getting the Cardinals back on track. Alex, I think this is a little unfair to Waino.
It's absolutely unfair to Waino.
I think it's a little unfair to the Cardinals as well. This should not be a situation that Adam Wainwright is put into. Whatever happens tonight, man, I hope it goes okay for him. Because at this point, and I'm not saying this in a paternalistic kind of way. I promise you. It's going to sound that way, but I promise it is not that for me. I legitimately feel kind of bad for the guy Because Wainwright is a legacy player here in St. Louis. He deserves to go out the way that he wanted to, and that was to get the send-off that, Yachty got last year. Not Albert. Albert's was different. That was unlike anything that you could have expected this year from Waino. But Yachty was a weird year for him. It was up and down. He ended up going back to Puerto Rico. We don't have to rehash everything, but by the end of it, we all appreciated and understood the value of what Yadier Molina brought to the table.
More so than ever this year.
And it was a different role for him, but he still helped you. That should have been what Adam Wainwright returned to. He shouldn't have been called upon this quickly to come back and help this team. Man, you've got other guys that can help you. Go ahead and use Matthew Liberatore for this spot start. Use McGreevy. Use one of the other guys. Use Connor Thomas, somebody that's down in the minors right now. If they end up getting hit hard, so be it. This should not be the spot for Adam Wainwright. I think the Cardinals are making a big mistake here.
I feel bad for Waino because the view of it is, the Cardinals were getting closer to climbing back into this, and then it fell apart of the Cubs, and now we're bringing Waino back, so he'll help us climb back up. That's not what this is. To me, this is like waving the white flag, saying, look, the season's done for. We know what the next week is going to hold with this trade deadline. And I understand where Waino's coming from of the comments that he made, I think it was to Alexa on the Bally Sports Midwest broadcast yesterday, just basically talking about, look, there's not a lot of games left in the season, and so I want to pitch before the regular season is done for. So that's what he's skipping those simulated games
still
for.
60.
I get it, but I think if you're Adam Wainwright, you realize what this is. You realize you haven't been good this season. It's fixed, air quotes. Going to a simulated game or going to get some type of rehab assignment, it's not going to make a difference. What Waino comes back with is what Waino is going to have. And right now, it just seems like the chase for the 2 games and really just to get to the end of the season with this. It's unfair for Waino to put those expectations of him being the savior for this Cardinals team. But let's be honest, this team doesn't need any saving right now. The boat is sunk in this one for the Cardinals, and now you have to move on. And after next Monday, August 1st, when Montgomery and Flaherty aren't here, then Matthew Liberatore is going to be getting some reps. Then Michael McGreevy or whomever they else deem as competition for 2024. But right now, this was a matter of there's no point in me going to Springfield to do a rehab assignment. What you get is what I'm going to have.
I think the Matthew Liberatore part of this conversation is what makes me the most frustrated. This is exactly the kind of situation that he should have been put in.
My question, though, and I'd have to double-check this, can he be called up yet?
Oh, fair question.
Because I can't remember when they sent him down, but I think it's possible he may not be at his 15 days.
This would be, I guess it's not injury-related, though. Maybe over the weekend they could have done this. If they were going to put Nolan Gorman on the IL, that would be something that they could have done here.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the roster management that we'll get to here in a second. That's a fair point.
I'm trying to find it where they option them, but I can't see it anywhere.
What was the exact date that they did? That's what we would have to look into. Was it July 6th? Is this right? So yeah, they could have called him back up. That would have been what I would have done here. Give him a start. Why not? What are you getting out of Adam Wainwright that you couldn't get out of Matthew Liberatore when he's
a milestone? You're chasing a milestone.
But I hate to be the bearer of bad news. He's not getting there with 65 pitches.
Yeah.
He is not going to qualify for a win today with 65 pitches. He's not going to throw 12 pitches on average per inning.
I don't think it's about getting there today, but it's building up towards it.
Sure, but get him that out of the bullpen. Then you could potentially get him to qualify for the win. Maybe you piggyback him with Matthew Liberatore today. That would have made a lot more sense to me.
That's essentially just starting Waino. Liberatore can't get through the first inning.
Fair, but
come on.
You know what? That was a jerk comment. I apologize.
We are clearly turning the page to 2024. I mean, John Mozeliak literally said as much in his most recent availability with the media, where he said, hey, we're going to be selling at the deadline. We are turning the page to 2024. Well, then let's see the young guys. Let's see what Matthew Liberatore can do. Let's call Mason Wynn up. What are we doing? And this gets us to the roster discussion that I wanted to have today, guys, because I feel like the Cardinals, more than any other organization in Major League Baseball, talk about their 40-man roster and how hard it is to navigate. Man, you can't get another player on this 40-man roster. Just look at how stacked it is. And all offseason, that's something that you hear about. Hey, the Cardinals should sign a reliever. Oh, but guys, they really got to protect Connor Thomas and Jake Walsh. Look at all these pitchers. that are on their 40-man. Or earlier this season when I was saying, hey, the Cardinals should probably, call up one of their minor league infielders or something. And I was told, but Jose Fermin. You might lose Jose Fermin from this 40-man roster.
I mean, they did kind of lose him. I don't know where he went. They finally found him and brought him back.
Well, he was hurt.
They didn't say that.
Have you seen his defense?
They didn't want to lose him from the roster, and so they kept him on the 40-man roster all season long, and we saw him over the weekend. And, guys, this weekend was the final straw for me. It really was. It's a very insignificant roster move.
Hold on, let BK cook, ladies and gentlemen.
But it's the principle of it, damn it, that made me mad. So over the weekend, Jose Fermin, I thought he looked fine defensively. I actually thought he was pretty good defensively for them. He was in the exact role that they kept him on the roster all year long to fulfill. And he's in there. He makes a couple of spot starts. They've got Brendan Donovan, who can't throw apparently right now. They've got Nolan Gorman, who's got a bad back. And they decided...
That's why that ball he didn't catch it.
Jose Fermin is going to be the guy that fills in for these players while they're out. Okay, cool. No problem. Jose Fermin is not a good hitter. That has never been his calling card.
Days after the man gets his first major league hit, and this man's over here saying he's not a good hitter.
That first major league hit was an infield hit on bunt that he found a way to beat out because of his speed.
You should love that, Tanner.
Well, I don't know if I liked it for your first hit.
And guys, over the weekend, they decided, you know what we need on a team that is hemorrhaging defense and has been pretty good offensively for most of the season? We need Taylor Motter's bat. Ooh. We just can't live without it.
That sweet 255 batting average, ladies and gentlemen.
And so what that required was them sending down Jose Fermin. He's still on the 40-man roster. Recalling Taylor Motter, selecting his contract, which means putting him back on the 40-man after doing this, 3 other times so far this season, and releasing outright Jake Walsh. Hey, man, Jake Walsh is not a guy that I am over here saying, hey, you messed up by releasing him. He may never become a major league arm. I've never been all that impressed in the very limited opportunities that we've seen here in the big leagues, but he's got velocity. He previously had swing and miss stuff. He's got an injury right now, so they're not using him down in the minors. Whatever. Okay, cool. Well, all year long, I had heard about how much they needed to keep Jake Walsh on the 40-man roster and how important it was for this exact situation to keep Jose Fermin on the 40-man roster. Alex, I never want to hear them talk about it again, ever. That cannot be a reason not to make a trade. That cannot be a reason not to sign somebody. That cannot be a reason why I need to hear about how they cannot bring up Mason Wynn later this year. And it's going to happen. There will come a point in time, probably around the deadline, when they trade Paul DeJong, and they've got a spot on the roster every single day for playing time at shortstop, and they're going to tell us Taylor Motter's going to get those opportunities. And instead of calling up Mason Wynn, because they're starting the clock and they got to add him to the 40-man roster, and where's the spot coming from? No. Call up Mason Wynn after the trade deadline. He should start every day at shortstop, and you figure it out. Just like you did for Taylor Motter 4 different times. Just like you have all year long for Jose Fermin. Just like you're doing right now for your 27 catchers that are on the roster. I'm sick of it. I am sick of it, dude.
You want to get really angry? Do you guys know...
the DFA Motter today?
Do you guys know a player named Richie Palacios?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just signed him recently. He is essentially Jose Fermin.
Yeah, he's an infielder that also can play the outfielder. Right? And
I thought he was a pitcher.
He's batting 301 with a 905 OPS.
Oh, where's he at?
He's in Memphis, where Taylor Motter was playing. And he's on the 40-man roster, too, by the way. And they chose this over bringing up Taylor Motter, putting him back on the 40.
Is this guy really on the...
he's on the...
They just traded for him, remember?
He's on the 40-man roster.
Guardians.
Oh, yeah.
He's on the 40-man roster.
I forgot about that guy.
This is my biggest concern about the offseason. We've had years of mismanagement with the 40-man roster of we can't put him on the 40-man roster because this spot's taken up and we don't really have places and we don't want to DFA this guy. The mismanagement of a 40-man roster tells you an awful lot about how you're forming your team for the next season. And the fact that they're so protective over these 40-man roster spots, if anybody... honestly believes that this team is going to overhaul their roster, specifically their pitching staff for 2024, look at how they manage their 40-man roster in the middle of a season. I'm very concerned. The red lights are swirling right now.
That's probably fair.
Guys, I think the Cardinals might be bad.
We had to put Taylor Motter on the 40-man roster when Richie Palacios has been hitting better than him significantly.
Well, most fans probably forgot about him like I did.
Maybe Mo forgot about him, too.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I think he probably
93 at bats. And
that's not enough. You can't read into that.
What was Taylor Motter doing down in the minors? Do you know?
He was hitting 255. Wasn't that his average?
255 with a 700 batting average and, a 700 OPS.
I have a follow-up question to when BK was cooking on Motter. Were you saying Motter's going to start a short after the deadline?
Sure.
Oh, my gosh.
Motter, by the
who
way.
else is?
Hopefully, if they're not calling up a win, I may have to quit being a Cardinals fan.
This is what it is.
Motter has, when Wynn's been over at second, they've had Motter at times at shortstop down in AAA.
Did you see Motter take that ball at second base the other day on the double play they tried to turn? He took it right in the gut. This is why they called up Motter. He's got 8 home runs. You got to put some power in the lineup.
That's what this team was missing.
Richie Palacios only has 4, so obviously weak.
And 93 at bats is pretty impressive, though.
I apologize for the anger that I have displayed here on the show today. I'm a little sleep deprived with the newborn at home.
It's okay, man. Everybody's feeling your anger.
Oh, you weren't joking. Connor Thomas is on the 40-man roster.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
I think he's hurt right now, but
I mean, he wasn't very good when he was healthy.
Yeah. I'm not kidding here. Any of the minor league pitchers that are available right now for AAA, I don't know who's starting today for Memphis, call them up. They should have made the start for the Cardinals instead.
Although they might be doing a bullpen game because, we're kind of low on pitching.
So should the Cardinals.
Well,
the Cardinals actually went with 14 position players and 12 pitchers over the weekend. That was a thing that a real Major League Baseball team in 2023 decided to do when they know that their pitching has been bad all season long because they can't have enough catchers on this roster. Right. They needed Taylor Motter on the roster, and they cannot go a week. When this team is playing as well as it has over the last few days, how could you possibly put a guy like Nolan Gorman on the injured list while he's dealing with a bad back? How could you do it?
All right, man. You're getting a real negative vibe right here about this team.
You know who's starting for Memphis tonight?
Nobody, because they're off.
Oh, yeah. We know who's starting for tomorrow.
That caught Tanner off guard.
Well, I just opened up the minor league app, and it just shows me the next game, which is tomorrow. You know who they're starting tomorrow?
Is it Matthew Liberatore?
They don't know yet. Probably bullpen game. Andrew Suarez, woohoo!
If you want to know what your team's going to look like for 2024, look no further than how the 40-man roster has been managed, because that'll tell you an awful lot. Can't overhaul it by going to get 5 new pitchers, BK, if we've got 15 guys on the 40-man roster that we haven't even seen yet.
If we ran through that 40-man roster, over-under, we have like 10 and a half guys that we're just getting rid of.
Oh, my God. Do you want to do that real quick? Do you want to list off some
Michael McGreevy was on turn.
What?
Oh, is it McGreevy's turn? Oh.
Michael McGreevy, it appears, should have been on turn to start today.
Guys, do you want to...
Well, today for the Cardinals.
That would have messed up his rotation, man. You can't do that. Do you want to do the 40-man roster and then see who should cut off of it? I had it pulled up.
Oh, we could do a purge later.
Do you want to purge? BK, do you want to purge?
We could purge the
BK, you've slept probably like 3 hours over the last day or so. You know you want to purge.
Michael McGreevy has a 3.8 ERA in the minors right now.
You peek under that hood. Ooh.
His last start went 5 innings, gave up 3 earned runs. The start before that, 6 2/3, gave up 1 earned run. The start before that, 6 innings, 3 earned runs. And that guy can't get a bleeping start in the big leagues. When you're hemorrhaging pitching and you need to figure out what you have on this major league roster going into next year, it's baffling. It is incompetence at the highest levels.
Guys, Moises Gomez is still on the 40-man roster.
Gone. That guy can't even make it up.
We'll do a purge later today. Messi did a purge with the United States players that he went up against next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals fell to the Cubs yesterday 7-2 as they dropped 3 of 4 in Chicago. And tonight they start a 3-game set in Arizona as 8:40 will be first pitch. And tonight Adam Wainwright will be making his return from the IL after dealing with a right shoulder injury. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Here it is. Messi! Could it have been any other way? Magnificent!
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. That's what it sounded like on Apple TV. I got to be honest, T-Bone. I have not watched any MLS games this season that did not include St. Louis City SC until Friday night. When I watched Messi's debut with Inter Miami, dude, that place was electric. We mentioned last week, I wouldn't have paid the price of admission to get into that game.
You don't want to pay $100,000 to watch a guy play 20 minutes?
What was it, like $700 to get in, basically? Was the cheap price for the
I thought
nosebleeds?
It was in the thousands.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot more than that.
I think I saw that it was, at least by the day of, it was down to like $700, $1,000, something like that.
A ticket scam website that you were on.
SeatGeek. I would not have paid that kind of a price. But if I had, and then I witnessed that, I think it would have been worth it. That was one of those moments that I will remember where I was when I witnessed that scene. And if you were there, it's like Game 6 of the 2011 World Series. Yeah, there were only 45,000 in the building, but about 600,000 people will claim that they were there to be able to witness that one. That was one of the cooler moments that you will see in the sports calendar year of 2023.
The only thing I could think of when I was watching that, to where a guy's debuting on his new team that has such a significant moment, was Austin Matthews when he debuted with Toronto. Scored a hat trick in that game. And I remember everybody was like, oh my gosh, this guy's living up to the hype. That's kind of what this Messi thing. The only thing was, you knew the hype was real with him. For a rookie, you don't know what the hype is. The hype for Messi was real. And when you're seeing all of the celebrities that were in attendance for a guy that they showed off of the kickoff, who is sitting in the seats because he's not starting, and the excitement buzzing for that, you knew it was a significant game. But for the way that that ended, I mean, you think of storybook endings, and it's weird to say that for a team that's just been terrible this year. But hey, when you get a storybook ending like that, when you get the new face of a team and he steps in and wins the game, that's impressive.
Yeah, I couldn't believe what I saw when he did that, because I was sitting there saying to myself, okay, this guy looks great on the pitch in just the 20 minutes that he's played, but he's going to get free kick. He's not going to really do what I'm thinking he's going to do, right? There's no way he can put this like upper 90, bend it in, and beat the goalkeeper to win the game. And sure enough, one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, does it. I mean, it was just
video game-esque.
Yeah, it was a hell of a debut for Lionel Messi. My biggest concern with Messi coming to MLS, if you even want to call it a concern, was that you were going to get kind of the washed-up version, older player coming to the end of his career. He was like playing with his food in the 20 minutes. Yeah. He was incredible out there. He looked great. BK said when we came into this, I hadn't watched an MLS game except for sitting in MLS. Yeah, me neither. And I'm excited. I'm going to watch probably every Miami game going forward, because that's just how good Lionel Messi is. They play on tomorrow against Atlanta in the, whatever it is, Champions League. I'm going to lock in on that game and watch that entire game just to watch Lionel Messi. That's how impressive he is and how great he is at his sport. I mean, him and himself in a 11-man sport with 11 players on the field, he can carry Inter Miami back into true contention in the MLS. It's incredible.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show from the 314. Guys, it just looks scripted to me. That's how it felt. Exactly. And that's sometimes what makes sports great.
Look at the World Baseball Classic, how it ended.
Exactly. With Shohei Ohtani going up against Mike Trout with the game on the line. The great thing about sports is that sometimes you get an ending or you get a moment that if a director or a writer had come to you saying, this is the script that I want to put out there, they would say, no, even Disney would say this is too unrealistic. And that's what happened on Friday night. Messi being able to end that with a PK the way that he did, that is the perfect ending. You couldn't have asked for it to be any better because it's the one opportunity in soccer where you get a one-man show in that moment where it's just him. It is just Messi with that situation, with the game on the line, and he can go win it for his team. That's what all of the hype was about, was this moment. And he lives up to every possible expectation in his debut. Do you know how hard that is, man? Like, we've seen some unbelievable players over the years come over, and, like, most of them are rookies, so they're young, and so it's a little different in that regard. But, like, you see LeBron James come into the NBA, and don't get me wrong, he's amazing right off of the bat. But this would be like him coming in and having a 50-point debut. Like, it's just... It's impossible for it to live up to expectations, and somehow it did. That's what we witnessed on Friday night with Messi. I didn't know. I thought I would be interested in it just because of, like, the gravitas of the environment, right? Like, how heavy this moment felt in terms of sports history. And then for it to not only live up to expectations, but almost exceed them for me. I think for some people, like, the Taylor Swift thing came out. Sorry, free kick. I called it PK, whatever. The Taylor Swift tour that's going on right now. People are talking about it like it's a life-changing event for them, right? It has these crazy high expectations, and it is exceeding those expectations for most of the people that are going. That's what this was on Friday night.
Yeah, for me, and I thought you said it perfectly. You know, when I saw Messi come in, I was interested, but I was curious to see just how he would look because I didn't expect him to live up to the hype in his debut. Like, I expected him to come in as a guy that hadn't played in a while. It's the only reason he played 20 minutes. He's going to be a starter. The only reason he played 20 minutes is because he's in his offseason, and over in Europe, they're in the offseason, so he's trying to build back up.
It was like 45 days he hasn't played.
Yeah, so, like, I expected, like, Messi to look rusty, look like a guy that hadn't been on a soccer field in a while.
Do you expect him to look messy out there?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, very good.
You'll get there, buddy. You've only been a dad for a couple of weeks. You'll get there.
But I expected...
How long have you been holding that one in?
That one just popped up when you said it.
Okay.
But I expected it to be like where I watched that game and I go, okay, it was cool to see Messi, but it wasn't like anything that was great. And then he comes out and again, he just dominates the way he did. Like, he was messing... He had plenty of opportunities that he gave up on shots and he passed it to open teammates.
Let me ask you guys this. He misses that kick. Is it an underwhelming? Are we not even talking about this today?
I think we're talking about it because he was so good in his limited time.
It's different.
I wouldn't say it's like
people in Miami upset.
We're not talking about it today. I will tell you that. We are not leading a segment today with Messi if he doesn't make that kick.
And that's the part that got me, because if you miss that, people in Miami are talking about the excitement, but nobody cares because it's like, okay, he had his debut and that was it.
T-Bone's right. He was spectacular in that debut. However, the way that he ended it was the story.
Yeah.
Like, for non-soccer fans, you could wake up today and watch Good Morning America, and they are talking about how Messi finished the game for Miami in his debut. That becomes it transcends the sports calendar. It transcends a sports story. Now it becomes a cultural phenomenon, right? That's how we end up talking about it here in St. Louis on our station. That's how I would assume, like, the Rizzuto show earlier today probably mentioned something about what Messi did on Friday. If he didn't make that goal, if he ends up missing and it goes to extra time, or the PKs, I guess, was what it would have been decided by, then maybe he does something special later and it's still a big story, but it's definitely a different debut if not for this.
Yeah,
but he did make it.
Yeah, that's the part that doesn't matter. You don't have to think that way.
I think it still would have been a big story because, like, just watching him in that 20 minutes, goal or not, I mean, he proved he's the best player in the MLS right now in 20 minutes. Like, that's how good he was in his debut.
Bite your tongue. That's Roman Berkey.
No, I'm sorry, but Berkey...
Well, last night we saw the difference that Berkey can make for City.
True. But no, like, Berkey's not even saving that shot for Messi.
No, Berkey didn't play last night.
I know. Just saying.
Yeah, kind of cruel to offend whatever his last name is.
That's not even there. Damn.
I mean...
It's fair, though.
We all saw it.
Yeah. Yeah, PK was, like, upset about one of the goals.
You're just proving my example, man. When you get kids, you just get angrier.
314-399-9646. Questions and answers next.
Give us your opinion on the Air Comfort Service.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers. Let's start with this one from the 314. Guys, I saw over the weekend that the Washington football team might be changing their name again, rebranding after the sale of the team. Do you have any ideas on what they should be called?
It's real simple. The Washington Sentinels.
Oh, going back to the replacements.
That's what you got to do.
Okay.
Like think of
T-Bone,
what
do
you have
know the
with
reference?
it.
No, I
figured,
Really?
but-
You don't know the replacements?
No.
Oh,
That's
what
like
a
early
phenomenal.
2000s. He was
I
like 4.
guess, but still, I feel like it's a cult classic to where if like you watch it as you get older.
I was
but
trying
It's
to
one of my
figure-
favorite all-time good bad movies.
I was
I
trying
think
to
it's one of the
figure
best
out.
football movies out there.
I was trying to figure out how it tied into Washington,
Oh, so
and
good.
it doesn't.
But like, you tell me how good that would be, because you always could have celebrity appearances from the movie as a part of it. You have movie clips to play in game as it's going on. I'm telling you, that would be the way to go.
I'm going to go out there on a limb here. Here's what I would call them. The Washington football team. I legitimately liked the Washington
so
football
basic.
team. I thought it was great.
I think it's lame.
It's a new brand that they could get away from the old Washington
Gross.
name that they had. Like I thought it was great. I would go back to the
You
Washington
know what
football
makes
team.
people happy? Gene Hackman and Keanu Reeves.
We're not building a soccer team. We're building a football team.
Hey, I thought it worked. I thought it was it became like its own identity within the team. So I would go with the Washington
Let's come
football
up
team.
with an identity
and I'm
with
not
a
kidding
name.
either. I would actually go with that.
Let's come up with an identity with.
I'd
a
love
name.
to have a Clifford Franklin bobblehead night. T-Bone doesn't get that reference,
I
but
don't at all.
it would be phenomenal.
I don't mind the Commanders. I really don't.
It's terrible. It's the
Really?
worst team. Yeah, it's the
Oh,
worst
no.
team name.
I also didn't mind. What was the team in the XFL that they had? Washington Defenders. I like that name too.
No.
I don't know if they'll go with that, but
I think like the Red Tails is one that they had come up with, and I think there's some legitimacy behind that one as well.
I'll forever stick to the Washington Sentinels.
I get that.
Maybe because I love the reference.
honestly, I would rather call them the Sentinels than the football team. I hate when soccer teams do that.
Probably have to change the logo, because the logo was like it was a Patriot, I think, kind of like the New England Patriots. So you'd have to change the logo and the colors, but still take the name.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line from the 314. Guys, how do you feel about Nolan Gorman being traded if they end up going that route? I feel like he would become the next Randy Arozarena. I don't think the Cardinals are going to trade him. I think he's going to be, based on all the reporting that I've read, he's going to be one of those players that they opt against dealing. Seems like him and Nootbaar and Edmund, surprisingly enough, are the quote-unquote untouchables.
Boy, that list just keeps getting
Here's the
bigger
thing.
and bigger as we
Like,
get closer to the deadline.
I don't care if he becomes the next Randy Arozarena if I'm getting the next equivalent of a Randy Arozarena pitcher. Like,
Sure.
if I didn't get Matthew Liberatore in the trade of Randy Arozarena, and I don't even know if he was a prospect at the time, but let's say they got Shane McClanahan instead, nobody would be even freaking talking about Randy Arozarena. So yeah, if somebody's willing to offer me the equivalent of what Gorman is as a position player in the pitching form, great. Trade him.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. It is. Would I be like trying to get rid of Gorman? No, but if I got something significant in value and I think I'm
If
acquiring
somebody
like
calls,
a number 2 pitcher or a number 1, yeah, I would trade Nolan Gorman. Nobody on this roster outside of Walker, Goldie, and Arenado should be viewed as untouchable.
Bingo.
And that's why I hate that this list has all of a sudden become Nootbaar, Edmund, and now Nolan Gorman. Like, that's ridiculous. You need serious help in your rotation, and who can get you serious help? One of these guys that I just mentioned on the back end of that
you
list.
can't be 14 games under 500 and start listing off players that you're refusing to trade.
Yeah.
Except for the 3 that he mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to have some
Goldie,
pieces to
Arenado,
build around.
Walker, and honestly, I would put Michaelis in
I was
that.
just going to say, I would have
And
Michaelis.
It's not because, like, I'm clinging on to him
But
for
you
dear
need
life.
somebody in that
You gotta have
rotation.
somebody that you can trust for
Because
2024.
it can't just be Mats.
So I would have Michaelis. And honestly,
No, now you're doing what Mo does.
no. I'm doing the opposite. If I could get a confirmation from Jordan Montgomery that he's willing to sign an extension for $20 million a year and I could keep him instead of Michaelis, like, I'd be fine with that too. If Montgomery becomes the de facto Michaelis in my rotation next year.
I don't need
guess I
7
could-
earned runs given up in 3 innings.
I guess I could sign up for that.
So
15 because you haven't pitched well.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 618. Guys, who is your surprise team in the NFL this year? If you had to pick one surprise team that will be better than anticipated, who would it be?
Well,
Every year we get
all
these.
Google the teams.
Yeah, I know. That's what you do, right? You look at the list of
pull the
teams.
list.
on.
I think it's got to come from the NFC.
Yeah, because AFC's pretty much set for you.
I'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, please.
going to do it again.
Say it.
I do it every year. I fall for two teams. Team in the AFC that I fall for every year because they're always loaded. Their roster is the best in the AFC, it feels like, outside of quarterback every single season. That's the Chargers. But setting that aside because the AFC is so freaking good, I have no idea what they're going to be.
The Chargers didn't have a bad head coach.
The NFC equivalent of the Chargers for me is the Atlanta Falcons. I fall for them every single season, and this year will be no different. They play in the worst division in football. They play in the NL Central of the NFL. Who else do you want in that? I think your surprise team is coming from that division. Somebody's going to win 10 or 11 games in the NFC South, and I don't know who it is. But for me, I would go with the Atlanta Falcons.
So we're going to fall for fool's gold. Where they're going to come out. I know, but what I'm saying is they're going to come out with like 10 wins and everybody's going to be like, whoa.
Sure.
But then you look in and go, oh, wait, they won 5 games in their crappy division.
Not to the same degree, but they're going to be the Vikings of last year where nobody actually believed in them when we got to the playoffs. But
hopefully their defense won't be as bad.
Sure. I think they have that potential. And I think their defense is going to be pretty bad in Atlanta. But I think their offense has the potential to be pretty similar to what we saw from Minnesota last year, where they just put up a ton of points.
There's two teams for me that I'm thinking of. One of them is also in the NFC South, and it's the Panthers. Just because I don't think they got superstars, but you've got your quarterback. You added some really good pieces like Adam Thielen on the wide receiver range, and then you've got Frank Reich. So they're one. The Bears would be the one that I would probably say better than the Panthers. They're in a tough division, which is rough for them. The Vikings and Lions, I think, are going to be good, but I view
weaker though.
I view the Bears as a wild card team this season.
Yeah, I was going Bears because I think the division is weaker. I don't view Minnesota as a team that is. They'll be fine, but I don't view them as a. I agree there. I think the Lions are the only team that I look at in the division that I go, they're tough to beat. That's why I think the Bears with Fields, and they've added weapons at wide receiver for them.
The Vikings still have Kirk Cousins and Jefferson, so it's going to be hard to beat that.
Yeah, I just think they took a step back this offseason.
So we got a bunch of people on the text line that are saying Detroit as the surprise team. They don't qualify anymore, in my opinion.
They're the favorite in that division.
They're the favorite in that division, and everybody's picking them to win it. So if they don't win 10 games this year, and I know that's high expectations.
Well, you won 9 last year and you've got better this year.
That is the expectation for them. So you got to find somebody else that's not currently expected by the consensus to win at least 10 games. And so that's where you end up with like Carolina, Atlanta, T-Bone. Who would be yours?
I think Bears, but no, they're in a rebuild that they're unwilling to admit.
You think the Bears? Okay.
Yeah. 2 other teams though that I don't even know if you qualify them as this. I think they do belong in this category. That I think I would put a shot at possibly doing this. One, the Denver Broncos. Now, they're in a tough division, but
I agree with that, actually.
If Sean Payton can get Russell Wilson back to playing like him, they've got weapons, and I could see where they do that. And the other one for me would be Tennessee, is if they get back, they're trying to get back to their football that worked for them, 2-3 years ago, where it was, we're going to run with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. He's not really good, but he's got a good weapon in A.J. Brown. Well, now you've got DeAndre Hopkins there. And in that division, I don't think Indy's going to be good. Houston's not going to be good. Jacksonville's tough, but I could see where Tennessee could surprise us and win 10 games.
Top 5 coach in the NFL, too.
Yeah.
Mike Vrabel's awesome. So if they won 10 games this year, it shouldn't shock anybody. The defense is going to be good. They, as you mentioned, got DeAndre Hopkins, he is not the same player as A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is a much better player at this point in his career than what DeAndre Hopkins is, but he's a legitimate number 1 wide receiver, and that's what they were missing a year ago. So you put him in that role. Treylon Burks now goes back into being like a gadget type of a player. You got Derrick Henry. It's all going to come down to the offensive line. If the offensive line can just be average for Tennessee this year, they'll win 10 games, and that might be enough to be able to win the AFC South, depending on how you feel about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll play a game of in or out. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can also watch us on the YouTube channel at 101 ESPN. But coming up next, are the Cardinals really considering a move that would shock everybody at this year's trade deadline? We'll discuss it next here on 101 ESPN.
Yeah, I think we'll table that till the off season. Obviously, when we look back at it in the short term now, there's some things that need to change. Short view is kind of nice. What we're seeing at Alec Herrera right now, which is good. But, ultimately, I think when we start thinking about 2024, some of those things will have to be more addressed in the offseason.
He's Alex Ferrario, that's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. That voice you just heard was John Mozeliak talking about the Cardinals' catching situation going into 2024. It's something worth keeping an eye on, maybe even before we get to the 2024 season. Bob Nightengale, who's going to join us coming up at 1:30 today, wrote this in his article over on USA Today earlier. They will keep the infield cornerstones, Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, in St. Louis. Outfielders Jordan Walker and Lars Nootbaar will stay as well, and they'll try to build around those players this winter and hope that they're back to the Cardinal way in 2024. Jordan Montgomery, Jack Flaherty, they could be gone. Closer Jordan Hicks, perhaps injured reliever Ryan Helsley, they could be gone as well. The Cardinals have the greatest array of talent available at the deadline, with outfielders Carlson and O'Neill also becoming available, Edman and DeYoung potentially available, and catcher Willson Contreras on the trade block too. Dun, dun, dun.
What happened?
Alex, that last piece there is what has caught Cardinals fans' attention. Catcher Willson Contreras on the trade block too. If this is true, and they legitimately are accepting offers for Willson Contreras, first of all, I don't think it should be particularly surprising, given everything that we've seen from the way that they've handled the catching situation this year. About a month in, they decided he's no longer their catcher. Now they have decided again he's pretty much no longer their everyday catcher because they prefer, clearly, Ivan Herrera. If you listen to the broadcast, by the way, Chip Carey and Brad Thompson will give you some little nuggets. Even if they're not, like, blatantly saying it, when they say time and time and time again, hey, the staff really likes the way that Ivan Herrera is preparing for these games, what they're really saying is that the staff doesn't like the way that Willson Contreras is preparing for games. That's the unsaid part of that praise for Ivan Herrera. So I'm not super shocked by this.
Didn't I hear the same praise for Tres Barrera, too?
Yes.
He was a good clubhouse guy,
You know why? Because they're trying to get it across to Willson Contreras very clearly. They don't like the way that he prepares for these games.
Well, you know how to do that? You talk bad about him without talking bad about him through the media. That always goes over well.
I think it's silly, all of this. I think they knew, or maybe amend that. I think they should have known what they were signing up for when they gave this man $85 million in the offseason. But clearly, they didn't do their homework. So, Alex, now you have got yourself into another pickle.
Oh, man.
Just as they did with Mike Leake and Andrew Miller and Brett Cecil and Dexter Fowler. Anytime they sign these big deals in free agency, it doesn't tend to go well, and then they try to get out of them as quick as humanly possible. Do you think there's any chance they actually get out of this one at the deadline, Alex?
No. And for people that think they will, why would a team who had every opportunity to trade for Willson Contreras, who was a pending unrestricted free agent that they knew that they didn't have to commit to beyond that season for a playoff run, nobody traded for him? Why would a team now trade for him in a Cardinals organization when he has been performing worse than what he did last year and has been basically drugged through the mud by this Cardinals team all season long? If I'm a contending team, I don't want any of that. I don't need that in my clubhouse. And if I'm a team that's missing the playoffs, why would I want that? Because I'm not going to give up my valuable players for somebody who doesn't match where I want. Now, maybe if the Cardinals say, yeah, we'll eat 75% of the contract, maybe somebody gets interested. But why would I want to pay 75% of his salary to go play for somebody else, not get much in return, when this guy is providing me very adequate offense?
I mean, he's hitting the hell out of the baseball. Have you looked at his Baseball Savant page lately?
Like people,
a lot of red.
People who want Kisner and Herrera as the duo beyond this season, I don't know if that offense is providing a Willson Contreras what he's providing right now for you.
It's not. Willson Contreras is a good hitter. Now, he's not an elite designated hitter, but you can have this guy as your 5 or 6 hole hitter, and you're doing okay as a team if this player's in your lineup every day. The problem is they so desperately want him to be better defensively, and I get it. He's not good defensively, but you should have known that.
Well, nobody else on this team is either, other than Arenado.
Fair, and he seems to be the only one that gets called out for it publicly in a way that none of the other guys do, but catcher also has more responsibility, so to a degree, I understand why they're frustrated, but it's their own doing. They built themselves this hole, and now they got to sleep. I don't really have a whole lot of sympathy for the Cardinals for signing a bad defensive catcher who is performing like a bad defensive catcher.
Can I ask you this, though? Is it just the Cardinals that puts this much pressure on a catcher? Is it still the Yadier Molina effect? Because I don't hear other teams put as much pressure on their catcher, even if they struggle.
I think the pressure they're putting on him is different than other teams in terms of we're seeing it publicly, but I think a lot of teams expect what the Cardinals are expecting from their catcher. You're going to handle the pitching staff, and you're going to be a good defensive guy that's going to help control the running game, especially now with the new rules.
Shouldn't some of this be on the pitchers too, though?
Yes.
Like, you have two guys on your roster right now that only call their own pitches, Miles Michaelis and Adam Wainwright.
Michaelis is kind of...
And Michaelis doesn't do it very often.
Well, I thought they were
tried
talking
it for
about
one game, and then he was like, I don't like that. That is
too much work. I don't want to do that anymore. The only reason I'm asking is, like, if I look through a team ERA right now, and you see the bottom dwellers in all of this, but then you see some contenders, like a team ERA of the Arizona Diamondbacks. I don't hear them complaining an awful lot about their catcher not working with their pitching staff well enough.
Yeah. So I think it's hard to know from the outside. I think it's really because the Cardinals will never actually give us a true answer on what specifically has gone wrong with Willson Contreras behind the plate this year. There was that report that came out, and it was unsubstantiated in terms of anybody else that corroborated it. But Michael Kay came out on the, what was it? It was ESPN broadcast while they were in London and said he had heard that Willson Contreras was putting down pitches that weren't actually there for a pitcher. So, like, let's say it's a reliever who only throws fastballs and sliders. He asked for a changeup.
Well, maybe Wilson's trying to make that pitcher better.
Maybe.
Saying, you need to work on a changeup, kid.
If that's true, it's pretty embarrassing for Willson Contreras, honestly, for that to happen in a regular season game. You should know your pitchers and what they specifically throw. That's not hard homework. That's not like knowing the tendencies for a player on where their hot zones are or anything like that. That's just very easily, what does your pitcher throw? And so if that is true, that does portend a poor pre-game planning situation. But they'll never say that. We'll never know for sure exactly what has gone wrong with the Willson Contreras stuff. I do think that the Cardinals have very high expectations of their catcher, and it's because for 15 years they were spoiled by one of the best defensive catchers in the history of the sport. Yadier Molina, how many times had we heard it over the years? That dude is like having an extra coach on the field. And the Cardinals just said it kind of offhand, and that was just a thing that they had that other teams didn't. And then when they lost it, when that guy left, and by the way, they were talking about this last year when Kisner was the guy that was behind the plate, all the pitchers were complaining about how Kisner doesn't call the game the way that Yadier Molina does. Yadi will guide Giovanni Gallegos through an inning. This guy is a wizard behind the plate. So last year they knew what the downgrade was for him from Yadi to Kisner.
You got there, buddy.
And they like Kisner behind the plate.
El Capitan.
Now imagine what the gap is going to be from Yadi to Contreras, who is considered by all evaluators to be a below average at best defensive catcher. Like, this is on you guys. If you expected more out of him than what he's capable of doing, then you need to look in the mirror on what your evaluation process is for these players. So I do think they expect more out of their catchers, but they say that on one side, and then they go and sign a guy that is exclusively known for his bat on the other. Who was it that told us during the offseason? I think it was Jim Bowden, who said, I can't see the Cardinals going out there. No, it was Keith Law. So I can't see the Cardinals going that route and signing Willson Contreras because of how much they value defense from their catcher. Sean Murphy should be the one and only target for them this offseason. And then they went the other way because they valued the bat more than the defense because that is what they're doing at almost every position right now, man.
This is where I stand with it. I want one more year of Willson Contreras as the catcher and put a better pitching staff in front of him. You put a better pitching staff in front of him to where 4 of those 5 guys weren't used to Yadier Molina. Let them work with Willson Contreras an entire offseason, have some actual talent on that starting pitching side, talent meaning swing and miss stuff. These guys are talented. I'm not saying that. Give that to Willson Contreras to work with for an entire offseason. And if it's still as bad, if we're still hearing this next year, then fine. Trade him. Eat the salary. Get rid of it if it's not working, because you went out and you got adequate pitching. You put it with Willson Contreras, and it still didn't work. But if we sit here and act like Willson Contreras is the sole reason that this team's starting pitching rotation ERA is a 4.77, it's a joke to me, because there have been plenty of other catchers that have been behind the plate this season, and the pitching has still been bad.
See, I'm not even looking at the pitcher's ERA and evaluating Contreras on the pitcher stuff. I mean, defensively behind the plate, blocking, not good. He does have a cannon behind the arm, but like even then, sometimes he gets a little too risky with his throws and throws it into the outfield. And if they're complaining about preparation from him, but not on Ivan Herrera, who's just in his second year, I think that's on Contreras. Like, I understand what we're saying and how the Cardinals laid their own bed. I don't disagree with that. But I think they expected him to be at that little ceiling that you just said, BK, where it was like, hey, you got Yachty, and then there was Kisner. I think they expect him to be on Kisner's level. And I think he's way below Kisner's level.
But they should have known that.
I agree. I'm not saying that. I'm not defending the Cardinals in their move. I think what happened, though, is their assumption was he would get to that point, and he hasn't. And I'm not going to sit here.
But then that's on them for expecting it.
I agree, but I'm not going to sit here and just say, oh, Contreras, this poor guy.
Oh, I'm not saying that I feel bad for, like,
he's got to be better.
I feel bad the way that they've handled this all season long. I think it's been a joke.
See, I think they've handled it right. If he is this bad preparing, he should not be behind the plate every day as a starting catcher.
Let me put this into, like, our world, right? If somebody...
Go ahead, use me as an example.
No, I'm going to hire T-Bone here for a second.
Let's do Tanner here.
I don't
if
like
somebody
where this is
in a sports radio company hired T-Bone to come in, and he's going to work in Houston, right? And they're hiring T-Bone to do the history of of Houston sports. That's the podcast that T-Bone is going to host, and he's got to be live on the air.
Doesn't sound interesting, man.
It's a radio to podcast show. You're going to do a live 1 hour show where you're just taking calls and you're taking requests on what you should talk about for an hour every single day at like 7 p.m. for an hour. You got to cover the hour with requests from the audience on way back when stories, right?
Ugh.
You would not do well in that show. No. It would go poorly.
If you prepped well, you would.
They may say, T-Bone, we're going to pay you $100,000 to do this show. And you'd say, well, I'll be damned. I'm going to learn a hell of a lot about Houston sports,
I'm the next
right?
Houston historian.
Now, who's in the wrong there? Are you in the wrong for accepting their money to do that show? Or are they in the wrong for hiring somebody that is clearly unqualified to do the job?
But you know what I'm going to do?
When you get exposed, you will get exposed.
You're the whipping boy.
You get fired.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to prepare, though.
And you're going to get exposed because in a 1 hour show, it doesn't matter how much you prepare for. You're going to have a guy that calls in and says, hey, T-Bone, think back to the 1993 Houston Rockets, the seventh guy coming off of the bench. What was your favorite story about him from that season?
Man, Hakeem was so good.
And you're going to say, I don't know, because I got nothing on it. And for Willson Contreras, listen, it's obviously a ridiculous comparison because Willson Contreras' job is to be a catcher. Your job is not to talk about Houston sports for a living.
Unless you signed up for it.
But his job, really, his title is catcher with a bat. Like, they signed him not because of his defensive prowess. They signed him because he's a really good hitter. And then the bait and switch came where they were like, oh, wait.
You're not good defensively.
We thought we were signing up for a below-average defender. We didn't realize what that meant because we've never seen what that looks like here in St. Louis, and we can't have that because we are a team that values defense behind the plate. Fair, you should have thought of that in the offseason before you gave this dude a 5-year contract. So I say all that to say this. Would I be shocked if they trade Willson Contreras at the deadline or in the offseason? No, I would not, because of everything that we've seen this year. Do I think it would be a massive mistake for them to do so and to eat all of that money and then for another team to be able to make good on Willson Contreras at $8 million as a really good hitting catcher and maybe a designated hitter? Yeah, I think that other team like the New York Yankees, the Cleveland Guardians, whoever ends up acquiring him, they would be getting an absolute bargain for what they are getting on the other side of this thing. And I think it would take that. I think you'd have to eat like half of the contracts to make this thing work.
Do you know how many people would be blasting this Cardinals team if they're paying Willson Contreras $10 million a year to go smash baseballs on another team? While we have Andrew Kisner and Ivan Herrera behind the plate.
I don't disagree, but I still think there needs to be more onus put on Willson Contreras. Like, I agree with everything you guys said.
What else can they put on Willson Contreras? They've taken him from the position. They've said you need to prep more. They put him back there 10 days later, and then now they're talking about him not prepping well. Like, what other onus do we need to put on Willson Contreras?
T-Bone, the Houston Astros wanted to sign Willson Contreras in the offseason as an outfielder and designated hitter. That was his alternative. So if the Cardinals didn't know then that he's not a good defensive catcher, because the team that has the really good defensive catcher and Martin Maldonado said, we really like you, but we really like you as a bat exclusively. We do not want you getting anywhere near our pitching staff. And the Cardinals saw that same guy and were like, wait till we get him.
You can be a catcher.
The Cardinals thought they could fix him. Just like the Cardinals thought they could fix their rotation coming into the year. Just like the Cardinals thought they could fix their bullpen coming into the year.
Their outfielder.
They thought our coaching is so good here in St. Louis that we are going to be able to fix all of these broken pieces that were elsewhere. And they couldn't. They couldn't fix Willson Contreras' defense because it can't be fixed. They couldn't fix this rotation to have more swing and miss because you can't teach it. Maybe you can make it incrementally better, and they have. You can't make a pitch to contact guy into a strikeout guy. And so for the Cardinals, what they did this offseason, the original sin of their offseason was believing they could fix everything. And they can't. And now they have to find a way to figure their way out of this hole. And it might end up giving away Willson Contreras, who's a good player, for nothing and paying him to go somewhere else, just as they did with Mike Leake and just as they did with Dexter Fowler. This might be round 3 of it in a 7-year stretch, guys. 7 years. They've paid 3 guys to go away. It's embarrassing.
And we're putting our faith in that individual to overhaul this pitching staff in one offseason to compete next year.
Well, when you look at his resume.
Yeah. Let's play a game of in or out coming up next.
Or on your 101 mobile app. This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Come on, man. Are you in or are you out? It's in or out with BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Train Heating and Cooling. Visit traininfo.com. It's hard to stop a train.
Four 3999646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out.
Arguing.
Alex, off air, was talking about how Doug Armstrong would never make the moves that John Mozeliak has made.
He wouldn't.
We all know our roles here on this show, and we play them well, I'll tell you that much. All right, let's play a game of in or out. Guys, in or out, this time next year, Jordan Walker is still in the outfield.
In. They don't have any outfielders next year when they trade Carlson and O'Neill, so I'm saying in. He'll be the right fielder moving forward. At least, I would give it a good 3-year window of him being a consistent outfielder. And if the defense still stinks after those 3 years, then they'll move him around.
Yeah, I'm in as well. I think they're going to give him an offseason and then run it back with him in the outfield all of next year. And then if it's bad, then I think they explore a position change. I think they're going to give him one more full year because look at Nolan Gorman. Nolan Gorman really struggled defensively last year. This year, he's been pretty good defensively. He's had a couple miscues, but I think he's been better defensively overall, and his range looks better.
He's been an average second baseman, and that's all you could ask for from him.
And we were expecting that. I think Walker, I think they'll hope for the same thing for Walker. Be an average right fielder with a cannon of an arm next year.
BK's out. He's the catcher next year.
I'm going to say I'm in on this.
He preps better.
Oh, well, cool.
I do think there is a legitimate discussion to be had, even though nobody wants to have it, on what the runway is for Jordan Walker in the outfield. I was listening to somebody from Fangraphs the other day, Alex. I know,
of course, the
nerdy numbers.
Jeez. Did you make an Excel sheet while you were listening?
So it was the guy that actually puts out the Zips projections, Dan Zimborski.
Oh, yeah, because those always go well at the beginning of the season.
No. He projects multiple years out, though, on what a player's value is going to be for their respective team. Jordan Walker's value for the Cardinals is like 7 runs better if for the next 3 years you just had him at DH instead of playing in the outfield, because of how bad he has been so far this year in the outfield.
You know what those 7 runs do? Win you maybe 2 games. You know where you are? Still 12 games under 500.
This year, totally agree. But what I'm talking about is, like, next year, if they do, big if, fix the rotation, and you've still got this level of play in the outfield, I do think there will come a point in time where the Cardinals say, we're better served while we're in a pennant race, putting Jordan Walker as a designated hitter, because, again, this is assuming that he's still the same defender then that he is now. If that is the case, there will come a time when you have to put him as a designated hitter.
Look, man, I like to have faith in people, and I'd like him to improve.
And that's why I'm saying I do think that he will still be an outfielder this time next year, because I do think he will get better. He's got the necessary athleticism. He's got a really good arm. It's all there in terms of the tools. He just right now cannot read the ball off of the bat, and then his routes are so bad. That is stuff that you, I mean, theoretically speaking, should be able to get better on.
And I do think he started to look slightly better in left. And then they flipped him back to right. And now I'm seeing some of the same mistakes of trying to get those reads off the bat, taking those routes. But I did think he started to look better in left as he started to get more comfortable out there.
Alex, what do you got for in or out?
In or out, boys. Keith Tkachuk is the clear-cut blue that should go into this next year's class for the Hall of Fame. Blues Hall of Fame, not the actual Hall of Fame. He's going to go there, too. But the Blues Hall of Fame. So people missed it. They put the list out that fans can vote on. And I mean, it's got everybody you can think of. It's got Backus. It's got Jeff Brown. It's got Pavel Demitra, Grant Fuhr, Barrett Jackman, Curtis Joseph. One, I believe. I was trying to read through it to figure out, but it looked as if one gets in.
Oh, well, then I'm out. I'm not sure he'll be the first one. Curtis Joseph and Demitra will have bigger poll.
I think Brett Hull will have a bigger
Brett Hull's already in.
Damn, that was class of 23.
He was the inaugural.
I was looking at it, and I thought that was...
I don't know if you know this, but his number's already up in the rafters at Enterprise Center.
I know.
So technically, he's already a Blues Hall of Famer.
This is on me for trying to do this while we're on the air. I was trying to look through to see who was eligible, and then they had all of these players. They had this little link that you have to click to go to the ballot.
That darn link. That darn link.
Tootin'. Tony Twist should get in, obviously. Year one.
I'm not against that because Tony Twist is a beast, but here's my stance on it. Keith Tkachuk is still currently one of the best American-born players in NHL history and one of the very few American-born players that has over 1,000 points and over 1,000 penalty minutes. And when I think of Blues, as much as I love all of these names and all of these eras, Curtis Joseph should be in this. Grant Fuhr, Pavel Dimitra.
And they will get in.
Everybody should.
Alex Steen will get in.
Alex Steen absolutely will get in. So will David Backes. But when I think of this era, I think of that President's Trophy team, and I think of how that franchise turned when they traded for Keith Tkachuk and how it stayed competitive all the way up until he retired. So I'm in on this, by the way.
Randy said 5 will get in earlier today.
5 get in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm in.
Well, I'm in on that.
So
Then he's going in.
If 5 are getting in, my guess would be
Chuck Turgeon,
Dimitra, Cujo, and Oates.
No.
Shanny probably is on that
I would say
list,
one
right?
of these old school guys.
I'd say Shanny.
I bet you Jimmy Roberts goes in.
That makes
Player,
sense.
And then the coach.
Sure.
So I would say Roberts, Tkachuk, Turgeon, Cujo.
Oates, Cheney.
I would say Chase.
Really?
Just because he's been so pivotal for the Blues organization for so long. Those would be my 5 that go in. So Chase, Cujo.
I mean, it's a loaded ballot this year because we're so early in on this. Like, you remember what it was early on in the Cardinals stuff, too, where it was legit tough discussions. I could see you going 20 different routes with this.
Oh, absolutely.
And you wouldn't be wrong on any of them. Tkachuk is a no-doubter. I think you're right on that, Alex.
Turgeon has to be a no-doubter because he's a Hall of Famer now.
And I think Cujo is a no-doubter.
I think so, too.
I think those are your locks. And then from there, you can start to have some pretty interesting discussions on who the other two would be.
Because unfortunately for Steen and Backes, I think those guys will have to wait a little bit longer, just like, you know, who was the one that just got in a couple of years ago that were like, man, he should have been at the beginning, but you had to wait so long for it. That's how this goes, to where some of these older guys deserve to be in that have been around for a while, like Jimmy Roberts, but Steen and Backes will absolutely be in sooner rather than later.
T-Bone, what do you got for in or out?
Well, we just were talking about the Cardinals' defense. In or out, they will win 4 Gold Gloves next year.
Man, I just took a drink of coffee, and if I didn't want to ruin the equipment in here, I would have done a spit take when he said that.
4? 4. Because I think there's 2 that you could probably lock in.
Willson Contreras.
Goldie. Where are your other 2 coming from?
Look, he doesn't even know.
If you sign a center fielder,
you're not
maybe
going to.
get a center fielder. What? You're the guy over there preaching for a center field. Don't give me that look.
You're not signing a center fielder.
Mason
Win potentially, depending on where the hell Edmund's playing. Edmund's a Gold Glove winner.
Yeah, out, buddy, out. 2.
What if
maybe.
I said 3?
I mean, it's not even a guarantee that Arenado ends up getting it next
Maybe
year.
one of your pitchers win it.
Do you guys think Arenado's getting it this year?
No.
I think there's been too much public discussion about his defense.
Yeah, but
I think he's been really good lately.
Name recognition and then the final course of the season for how good he's been, I would say it's going to be close.
I don't think they're winning a Gold Glove this year.
Who would beat him out? Who's been better at third base?
Ryan
Riley.
McMahon's been really good.
Hasn't Austin Riley been pretty good defensively?
Yeah.
I'll say it. Riley probably the one, and he'll draw a lot of buzz because of his offense too, which will tie him into his defense.
And Brian Hayes. I think Hayes might be the one that actually wins it this year.
I think Nolan Arenado.
He's been on his heels for a few years
but
now.
Even if you put it at 3, I'd say out. Maybe they win 2 next year, but
Goldie and Arenado.
That would be
I don't think there's a first baseman that'll win it over Goldie. I don't think Goldie will get it.
His defensive metrics, though, are not good.
Defensively, he was rough in the first month or 2 of the season.
First base, dude. Those defensive metrics don't count.
Yeah? Tell Jose Martinez that.
Well, exactly. They considered him to be an average defender at first.
Get the bleep out of here. That's why you don't listen to Fangraphs, ladies and gentlemen.
Coming up next, how would you evaluate these trades if this is what the Cardinals were able to get in return? We'll tell you who they are next year on 101 ESPN.
Coverage of 101 fastest hour in sports radio.
Driven by Munganast Acura.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Taylor Hendricks here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals lost to the Cubs yesterday 7-2 as they dropped 3-4 in Chicago. And they start a 3-game set in Arizona tonight. 8:40 will be first pitch. Adam Wainwright will get the start as he'll be activated from the IL later today after being on the IL with a right shoulder injury. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road trip 24/7 at Londoff.com, LondoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Well, I definitely think we're going to treat the trading deadline as pitching, right? Now, that's not to say we're going to ignore a position player that, may be like just uber great, and so we have to be cognizant of that. But I think the goal would be to address as much pitching as possible.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Taylor Hendricks, I'm Brandon Kiley. That was John Mozela a couple of weeks ago talking about his approach to the trade deadline. Pitching, and more pitching. That is what he is expecting to add as we get closer to the trade deadline. Alex, earlier today, The Athletic did what I thought was a pretty good piece. I hate everything that they did for the Cardinals, but a good piece nonetheless on what reasonable expectations would be for teams that are selling at the trade deadline. So they tried to find some previous deadline deals that are similar player quality to what you could see dealt at the deadline this year. So, of course, there were a lot of Cardinals that were featured. Let's go through a few of these, and you tell me what you think about this potential return for the Cardinals if they were to trade these players. Fair?
I would love to. Let's go down this path together.
What would you like to start with? They've got 4 players for the Cardinals. You tell me, dealer's choice, which one you would like to go with
first. Can I guess the 4 players? Montgomery, Flaherty, Hicks, and Carlson.
Yeah, well, you knew what they were, but yes, those are the 4.
Look at me go, 100%.
Wow.
Let's start with one of the pitchers. Let's start with Jack Flaherty.
Okay, Jack Flaherty they compared to Noah Syndergaard last year.
Oh, God.
Noah Syndergaard was traded for a previous number 1 overall pick. He, at the time, was batting below 200.
Doesn't matter. Nail Yakupov.
The Philly system.
Number 1 overall.
Quote, the return for Syndergaard was a former number 1 pick, but at the time he was at the post-hype prospect status and an A-ball outfielder. That's probably the low end for what the Flaherty trade would be. Alex, if this is the formula for a trade for Jack Flaherty, your thought would be what? A former top pick that has flamed out in the minor leagues, but maybe you see something in them that you think you can turn around.
That's the part that's tough for me.
A-ball lottery prospects type of a player. That return would be what?
This is the guy we were talking about in the office, Moniak.
Mm-hmm.
Dude,
he's been really good this year, by the way. He's been amazing.
331 right now for the Angels.
Yeah, he's been great.
It would be underwhelming in terms of see, that's not true. I think if it's me and I'm getting the background of this player that is just not panned out where he's at, I would be cautious but optimistic, if that makes sense.
Doesn't. No, does not make sense.
Cautious because this team sucks at evaluating talent, but optimistic because somebody thought this guy was talented enough to be a number 1 overall pick, i.e. Logan Brown or Nail Yakupov. And it didn't work out, but I was cautiously optimistic. Did that make more sense? That's where I would be at with Jack Flaherty. Because I don't know really how much you're going to get for Jack Flaherty. Other teams know, unless it's the Dodgers, we don't have a chance to re-sign him. He's been okay this season, so we're going to take a chance. That would be cautiously optimistic for me.
Yeah, I think I would probably have the same approach to where, like, the day after the deadline is done and this deal is made, I would probably look on it and go, oh, I don't know about this. I don't know about this return that the Cardinals are getting for Jack Flaherty. But if I go back and reevaluate it in a year and the player ends up working out and he just flamed out in the system he was in, then yeah, I would say it's a win for the Cardinals. I think it's going to be tough to grade the trades the Cardinals make this deadline until 2 years down the road would be my guess because of what they're going to be acquiring. They're going to be acquiring cost control, young pitching, and I would assume that's what this would be. Instead of an outfielder, they would be acquiring a pitcher that's kind of flamed out in his system. So I would probably be kind of like looking at it in hindsight at the moment, I don't know about this trade. But my hope would be in a year or two, this guy's really impacting the team because I don't think the Angels are complaining about getting Mickey Moniak from last year's deadline.
Tampa Bay's complaining about getting Randy Rosarena either, who flamed out in the Cardinals system.
Here's the thing. If we're talking about pitching, and that's what they end up acquiring for Flaherty, let's assume that the player that the Cardinals get is like, it's Moniak, but on the pitching side of things, right? So it's a former top pick that flamed out in their organization. Let's call it somebody in another organization that's similar to Matthew Liberatore, for example.
Oh, crap.
I don't know what that guy does for you. Like, how is he utilized here? Because if this was a losing team next year, you just throw him into your rotation and you find out what it looks like. And you see if there's anything there for him. Like the Royals. They should trade for a pitcher like that to see if there's any upside remaining. Because what's the downside, right? He still stinks and you've got a bad pitcher in your rotation. Well, gestures wildly at everything else in the Cardinals.
God, I hope people are watching YouTube for that
right now. Like, the Cardinals can't do that. They need certainty. And so I just don't see the value in adding something like that. Instead, I would be trying to target guys that are bringing certainty to my rotation. And that's really hard to find. I understand that, but that's why I would not like this return at all.
See,
I would instead try to package Jack Flaherty.
That's what I was going to say.
With another player or two players, multiple guys, to a team. Maybe it's the Dodgers, maybe it's the Yankees. I don't care who the team is, honestly. And find the guy you're targeting from that team and find out what your package is that you have available to go get that guy. Make this about quality, not quantity.
That's just what I was going to say with that, because the other athletic piece, and I was reading it, the New York Yankees athletic beat writer was talking about trades, who says no with the Cardinals and Yankees, and he was packaging guys together, but the other side was like 3 of the prospects for the Yankees in terms of pitchers, and he's like, well, the Yankees are going to say no. I don't care if it's 2 or 3. I don't care if it's 1. If you trade 2 guys, of let's say a Hicks and a Montgomery to the Yankees, give me the best prospect available that I can get for this trade.
Go make a bet.
Yes.
Go say, this is our guy, and we're putting all of our chips in for that dude.
Just give me 1.
And if it fails, man, so be it. The likelihood is whoever this post-type sleeper prospect is, they were probably going to fail too. Like, it has worked out for the Angels this year. And credit to them for betting big on a prospect that had flamed out in another system that ended up working for them. Credit to them for that, for finding that guy and developing him and getting his career back on track. The likelihood of it happening again, whether it's for the Angels or anybody else, is slim to none. So go find the guy that has actually had a little bit of success that you say, you know what? That guy's got like a 4.0 ERA this year at AAA, but the strikeout rate's good. The walk rate's low. He's had a little bit of bad luck. We think that that's a guy that if we put him into our rotation next year, that guy could be a number 3 for us right now. That's the guy they need to go acquire. So I hate this deal for Jack Flaherty, honestly. I would be super underwhelmed if this is what they got in return for him.
See, I don't hate the deal if it is you go get that cost control guy by getting him in another trade. Like, if you end up packaging, I'm just going to use this as an example, Monty, DeYoung, and Hicks, and they all go to the Yankees, and you get those prospects that we were just talking about, and you get that guy that you're talking, say Clark Schmidt's in that deal, because I know he's a guy you talked about last week, and you get that cost control guy that you like, that you think profiles a 3, and then you've just got Jack Flaherty left. You don't really want to package him with Gio. You don't really want to package him with Helsley. Nobody really wants Stratton.
Hey.
Sorry. But you trade him, and then you get that 100. Like, that's the scenario where I would say, okay, yeah, that's the deal where I look at it and I go, you know what, I kind of like that return. You're taking a shot in the dark. You know Jack's not going to be here. And if this guy works out and it works out like the Angels deal, who knows what you just acquired? It shouldn't be, though, where it is like every player you deal is individually, and that's what we're talking about, where you're getting this kind of return. But if you get a cost control pitcher in another deal, and then you decide to do this, where you're looking at a guy that flamed out another system that you think still has a decent ceiling, then I'm okay with the return that the Cardinals get. I think it's more so about what you acquire in a whole, rather than just each individual deal. Because if there's not a cost control guy that you view as a 3 in any of the deals, then yeah, all your returns were bad.
It's a fair point, and I'm looking more A to B. You're looking like A to B to C, and how does that get you to D? And I think that's probably the better way to look at it, honestly, is the way that you're looking at it. Because if some of these prospects end up getting flipped, for example, in the offseason, you could still get that starter that I'm talking about. Just it took you 2 different moves to be able to get that guy that we're discussing. So that is a fair point. And it's something that I think if they go that route, I will give them the credit that they deserve for doing so. I'm very cautious.
I mean, that's fair.
And skeptical about whether or not they will actually go make that second move. Because what they tend to do is, hey, I really like this guy. Yeah. Now he's on our system. We're going to go fix him the way that we did with Willson Contreras and our pitching staff and all of these other things that we fixed in the offseason.
I'm thinking more along the lines of how the Brewers did it at the deadline last year. Now,
for sure.
They traded Hader. They acquired Payamps, I think Ruiz, if I remember correctly, and somebody else. I think they DFA'd him. or for a guy that was free agent being then he walked. And then they traded Ruiz to Oakland in that 3-team deal that sent Murphy to the Braves. And who did they acquire? They had catcher Willson Contreras. So they have one of their top relievers who's their 8th inning man now that impacted them last year and this year. And then they used the other prospect that they got in that deal. Then they flipped him to go get their catcher, Willson Contreras, who's been really good and a big part of their offense. So either way, how you want to view it, I don't think either way is wrong. But if you look at it and you get some pieces that you are saying, okay, we got these, not sure how they profile, let's sell high on them and go get somebody else for us in the offseason. I think either way works out.
Let's go through a few other of these really quickly. Jordan Montgomery, they compared to J-Happ. No, not when the Cardinals acquired him, but going back all the way to 2018.
Cardinals
they said,
just gave him some bats.
Quote, Montgomery offers the same kind of high floor reliability that made Happ appealing at so many different deadlines to different teams. I think he was traded at 4 different trade deadlines, by the way.
God.
Who they traded for? They traded J-Happ at the time for Brandon Drury and Billy McKinney. Drury at that point was a 25-year-old quote-unquote prospect. He was really kind of one of these post-type sleepers as well. He was struggling in the Toronto system. That season, he was batting 155 in the majors. And down in AAA, he was hitting a little better. He was batting 290, but didn't have the same power. Of course, he's gone on to eventually be a really solid major league player, Brandon Drury has, but it took a while for him to get there. Billy McKinney, it took a long time for him to become even a major leaguer, but now he's a legitimate piece at the big league level. How would you feel about that kind of a return, Alex?
A lot more intrigued than the previous one.
Agreed.
Just because you've got more guys closer to the major league level. And I'm just considering this more of the pitching side of it rather than the Brandon Drury side of it. But you got a guy who's been struggling, gets to the major league level, and then another guy who's in the system that could be at the major league level. Like, I'm a lot more intrigued by that, which makes sense because Montgomery is going to be the most valuable piece that the Cardinals have other than Hicks at this trade deadline. This one, to me, I look at it and say, okay, I see where they're trying to go with this. You're adding some pieces for 2024.
Yeah, I don't mind this one because you're getting 2 guys that are close and that were viewed as top 100 prospects at some point. And if you get that, then I'm okay with that kind of a deal. And again, you still got to go find that cost control 3 because I don't think either of those guys kind of, if they're top 100 prospects, doesn't necessarily mean they're that, a.k.a. Matt Liberatore. So you got to still go find that number 3. But again, if this was a separate deal on its own, I like the return.
So the final one that I wanted to get to here was Jordan Hicks, because they compared him to the Craig Kimbrell return back in 2021, where they got Nick Madrigal and then a bullpen arm that they didn't really care about. This was really all about Nick Madrigal in this deal. And we know what he has ultimately become at this point in his career. And at the time, this is 2021, Madrigal came into the season as a top 40 prospect in all of Major League Baseball, and in some places he was a top 15 prospect. Baseball Prospectus was really high on what he was ultimately going to become. He was featured in the Futures game earlier that summer. This is why when people talk about trading either Jordan Hicks or Ryan Helsley, they talk about what kind of a return you could potentially get for them. The most valuable commodities at the trade deadline, it's pitching, right? People always say pitching, pitching, pitching. That's the most valuable commodity. It's actually relievers, because everybody needs relievers, and that's where the bidding war starts to go up. Because there's a lot of teams across Major League Baseball that already believe, hey, we've got our top 3 in our rotation set going into the postseason, because they set up their rotation to be a top 3 in their rotation coming into the season. It's a really weird phenomenon that other teams do. The bullpen, guys get hurt. It's erratic. You never know who's going to end up working out back there. At the deadline, you can figure out, okay, who are the arms that have worked out this year? Let's go acquire those guys right now. So Jordan Hicks, if you were to trade him, I don't know that you'd get this kind of a return. Craig Kimbrell is one of the best relievers we've ever seen. You could get something of significance, though, and that's the one I would package him with something else. I don't know what it is.
Jack Flaherty.
That's how you get your big-time return of a legit arm that factors into the middle of your rotation next year.
That's why, for me, Hicks and Flaherty to the Dodgers. Figure out what they want or who they're willing to pass up on. You get the best available and you package those 2 together, because the Dodgers, of course, would be the most intrigued in Jack Flaherty. You get Jordan Hicks to help out that bullpen. Give me your best prospect available, and that's my deal that I'm going to pull off, and then I'll figure out what I can get with Jordan Montgomery elsewhere.
those are some of the deals that we could see, or at least comparison for deals that we could see at the trade deadline for the St. Louis Cardinals. Who are we going to see moved? Will that list include Willson Contreras? We're going to ask that of Katie Woo, the Cardinals insider for The Athletic, as she joins us next year on 101 ESPN.
From the opening drive, the balloon party, BK and Ferrario, to the fast lane and more. If you missed anything on 101 ESPN today, get caught up with all the shows and 101 podcasts at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app.
Driven by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Look for John Deere savings this Friday and Saturday at the St. Louis.
picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Let's go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by Katie Woo, the Cardinals insider for The Athletic. You can follow her on Twitter or X. I don't know what we're calling it nowadays. At Katie J. Woo. Always appreciate her joining us here on the show. Katie, I hope you enjoyed yourself up in Chicago this weekend. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, guys. It's nice to be back in Phoenix. You know, I went to school out in Tempe, forgot what it was like to spontaneously combust as soon as you step outside from the heat. But other than that, I'm looking forward to what should be a pretty hectic week, not just for the Cardinals, but for Major League Baseball leading up to the trade deadline.
Absolutely. And I want to start by looking back before we look forward, Katie. I feel like on Friday, we've said this a million different times, but I think there were some that were starting to buy back in. I think Friday, when the Cardinals lost that game and Alec Burleson hit into that double play specifically after the blown call by the umpire, that for me was the moment where it was like, okay, snap back into reality that this team is not going anywhere. Did you feel that momentum kind of blow itself out of the stadium as that play was taking place on Friday?
You know, I didn't. I can certainly understand why people did. I didn't because I've basically been a hater and thought that six-game winning streak was a little bit of a fluke. I did not think it was sustainable. So for me, you know, while Burleson did everything right, and I hate to harp on things that happened 2 or 3 days ago, but I just feel like, you know, the umpiring over the series was far from ideal. For Burleson to do everything right and for them to still lose, it solidified to me again that they should be selling. You know, it's a very unfathomable concept in St. Louis to be approaching the trade deadline as true sellers. But I thought the worst thing that this organization could have done was ride high off that 6-game win streak and think, you know, maybe, hey, we can turn it around because it's just so clear. If they want to address their problems going forward, they have to take the hit, really, and sell at the deadline and set their sights towards 2024.
Katie, don't call it a hater. I call it a realist. That you just understood that this Cardinals team wasn't going to be able to figure it out. But because BK likes to live in the past, I like to look forward, Katie. And as we approach August 1st for this trade deadline, tell me how optimistic you truly are that John Mozeliak is going to be able to overhaul this pitching staff for 2024.
I would say I'm cautiously optimistic that there will be significant improvements, but they clearly won't all happen at one time. I think to set the standards for this year's trade deadline as when the Cardinals are done on August 1st, clock strikes 4 o'clock Central Time or whatever it is, and the Cardinals have all their problems figured out for 2024, that's not what's going to happen here. But what this trade deadline is going to do is it's going to set the foundation for an offseason in which hopefully the front office can really get everything together for next year. I think there will be some significant turnover. I do think Jordan Montgomery will be traded. I do think multiple relievers will be gone, depending on who. It's kind of up to what each contending team is looking for because the Cardinals have a slew of relievers that can all do different things. Not quite sure about Flaherty. I can hear both arguments that they should trade him now or that they should see if he'd be willing to sign a 2 to 3 year extension because he does have that swing and miss when that fastball command is right that the Cardinals are coveting so deeply. But I think, again, in order to set our expectations straight for this trade deadline, this is not going to be the time of year where the Cardinals fix everything. They're merely just going to set the foundation to set them up to succeed in the offseason, and that's where most of the bulk of the work and I think the most important work will come.
Katie, I want to get your perspective on a conversation that we've been having here on the show over the course of the last week or two. I brought up the name last week, Clarke Schmidt. Now, he is the most average of average major league starters. Literally, when you look at his ERA plus, which is on a scale of 1 to 100, like 100 being average, he's at 98 this year. He's nothing to write home about. But he's a legit average major league starter, and the Cardinals could really use guys like that in the rotation right now. Is that the kind of guy that the Cardinals are going to be looking to acquire at the deadline? Or do you think this is about them getting as many young starters that are still in the minor leagues as possible? How do you view what they're looking to acquire?
I think it's a combination, right? We know the Cardinals want to be competitive in 2024, and luckily for St. Louis, they reside in a division where that is an entirely possible scenario. Now, there's a reason that they're not asking for prospects below the AA level. They want major league ready talent or talent that is knocking at the door and could be major league ready by spring training or early 2024. Now, Clark Schmidt, of course, I actually had him in a deal with we've been doing a lot of trade packages at The Athletic, partnered up with our Yankees writer, Chris Kirshner. He's fantastic. And Clark Schmidt was a name he floated from New York side if the Cardinals and the Yankees ended up making a trade. I could see him being one of those 3-4 guys in the rotation. Now, the argument that we're going to get, right, guys, is they don't need another 3-4 guy. They have a lot of 4-5 guys already, so a 3-4 guy doesn't really move the needle all that much. But I do think Clark Schmidt is a reasonable name they can acquire. He's ready to go, or even a Clark Schmidt prototype, right? He's experienced. He has lots of team control. The Cardinals are really coveting that. And I think that he's someone that won't cost an entire team control. Like, he won't be a big haul to get a name like that. Now, of course, if the Cardinals have a name, let's say, I think the most ideal name out there right now in a perfect world would be Logan Gilbert. They're certainly going to try to get Logan Gilbert, right? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if he floated their way, I mean, they'd be not very smart to ignore that offer.
Sure.
But I think in terms of what we're looking for, what the Cardinals are looking for this deadline, is bolstering as much major league ready talent or close to ready talent as they can.
Katie, we've heard the names start to come out of guys that the Cardinals are unwilling to hear discussions on. Goldschmidt, Arenado, Jordan Walker, makes a lot of sense. And now we've gotten the Lars Nootbaar. Are there more names that you feel like should be on that list going into August 1st?
I'm going to push back a little bit, and I am not prepared for what this is going to do to the text line. But luckily for me, I don't have to read that. Just you guys do.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if Jordan Walker is considered 100% untouchable at this point, because when you look at I'll go on the record and say I don't feel the Cardinals have put him in the best position to succeed in the outfield. I think he's had to learn and adapt at the major league level at a very, very fast pace, and that is really hard to do for a 21-year-old who has, up until this point, played the outfield professionally for almost a year. So he's not even had a full calendar year of experience. They switched him to the outfield in Springfield last year at last year's trade deadline. It is really difficult to go out there and succeed in that position. However, what we've seen from Jordan Walker over the last 4 months is that outfield is probably not his position in the big leagues. He's an exceptional defender at third base. He could also play first base, and we can go on and on about his offense. But what do the Cardinals have locked down at third base and first base? They have their cornerstone faces of the franchise. You can long-term DH him, but that doesn't really fit with what the Cardinals do in terms of their lineup flexibility. So they would certainly hate for Jordan Walker to go, but I don't think he's regarded as 100% untouchable at this point.
So let me follow up on that, because Katie Wu is the Cardinals insider for The Athletic. You can follow her on Twitter at KatieJWu, and you should be reading all of her fantastic work over at The Athletic. Katie, I feel the need to ask this follow-up. Are you saying, based on your opinion from watching Jordan Walker this year and the struggles that he's had in the outfield and what we know with Arenado and Goldie not moving, you believe that the Cardinals should not view him as a untouchable? Or are you saying, based upon your reporting, the Cardinals do not view Jordan Walker as an untouchable?
No, that's a great clarification to make. This is my speculation, just based on what I've seen watching Jordan Walker. Again, I think the Cardinals, more or less, unless it's an overwhelming offer, will not move him. And that would be a PR nightmare. It would not be something I personally would like to write about. But I do think when you're looking at how this team can get better and how they can acquire the pitching talent they desperately need, they're going to look at position log jams. And Jordan Walker is the type of name that's going to get every organization to listen to you. So it's a strategic play. Again, this is just my speculation. This is just hey, let's see how crazy can these things get at the trade deadline. But I'm not sure if he's 100% untouchable. I would say he's about 90.
Do you look at that untouchable list then, Katie, as Goldie and Arenado, and that's it?
Essentially, yes. I've put Brendan Donovan in the 90% untouchable as well. I just think Brendan Donovan is a ball player, even with his injury. We don't know what that's going to look like, but he's the type of player that teams move around. He is not someone that I think should be traded. At the same time, he is someone that 29 other organizations would love to have on their team.
Katie, there's one thing we don't do on the show, and it's agree with BK.
Yeah, she gets it. She knows ball.
Sorry.
Come on, Katie.
Sorry, guys.
Katie, what do you see happening with Willson Contreras over the course of the next 6 months?
That's a really great question because I'm not sure if he'll be the long-term catcher come 2024. I think there's a reason the Cardinals have 3 catchers on their roster right now. We know how short they are in pitching, so for them to be carrying just 12 pitchers says a lot about what they think about their catching position. They need to see what they have in Ivan Herrera. I think Herrera looks exceptionally better than last year. He looks ready. He looks more confident. There still will be growing pains, but he's in a position to catch almost every day. The Cardinals need to figure that out because if they look to move Contreras to a DH role or even put him on the trading block, they need to know what they have in their reserves in Herrera and Kisner before they can do that. It would be a monstrous trade, right? The Cardinals would be required to eat a lot of that contract if they do decide to move him. But again, St. Louis is in that position where a lot of the guys that you think are untouchable won't be because St. Louis needs pitching so direly that almost everyone is going to have to be on the table. So I'm not sure what Contreras' designated role will be over the next 6 months. I'm not even sure if he will be here. But I say that about a lot of guys. So we'll see. But I think it is pretty telling right now that the Cardinals are carrying 3 catchers and are down a pitcher when they so desperately need one.
Katie, my final question. What would you set the over-under in terms of number of players on the active roster, so from their 26-man roster that are traded by the deadline? What would you set the over-under at?
Oh, good question. Let me count. Let me use my fingers real quick.
Sure.
I would say I think 6 is a healthy number.
It's a serious number, Katie.
Yeah? What do you guys think?
I think it seems low.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think you have enough fingers on your hand to count how many players are going to get traded.
What, you trading a whole 40-man?
Sure. Might as well. We said we were going to purge.
Season?
I got 20 guys on the 40-man that I could be interested in to get moved.
I feel like I've got 6 pitchers that I could move.
Right, but guys, like we talked about, to get value, you have to be able to give value away.
Sure, and I'm not kidding, though.
True that, Katie.
Flaherty, Montgomery, Helsley, Stratton,
Verhaeghe,
Hicks, and then literally throw any other pitcher that you want to into the mix. I'm at 6. That's just the pitchers, Katie.
That's true, but I don't think I'm not sure Verhaeghe is tradable. I think just again,
bag of balls. Let's go.
Sentiment.
Yikes.
Gallegos is probably an under the radar name to watch. I think Giovanni Gallegos could get moved this deadline.
There's your 6th.
Yeah, we didn't get to the outfielders, so maybe I'm low. Maybe I am low. Let's go to 8. 8's a good number.
There we go, Katie.
If you had to guess, Katie, how many current outfielders will be in the starting outfield on opening day of 24?
Ooh, okay. Now, are we counting outfielders like true position or players that are just currently playing the outfield?
Because you think Willson Contreras is going to be a left fielder. I get it.
How many actual outfielders do you think will be outfielders in 24 for this team? So basically, you can tell us what you think of Tommy Edman.
Yeah, I was about to say, is Tommy Edman an outfielder? Does he fit this? Lars Nootbaar and Tommy Edman, I think, will make up a... Well, actually, I don't even know where Tommy Edman will be. I don't know if he'll be center fielder, shortstop, or second base. But I think for the purpose of the exercise, we'll include him. And then I don't really consider Donovan an outfielder, but he does play the outfield, so we'll throw him in there. So I guess 3, a loose 3.
Still have a log jam in that outfield then.
Katie, have you ever seen anything like this, where a team has this much influx?
I haven't, and that's, again, what goes back to my Jordan Walker point, is they have to find a place for him. And... no matter, and this is the problem that they have with almost everybody on their roster, right? Like, I don't want to continue to harp on the Walker thing. I just think it's an interesting point. They have so many players and nowhere to put them. And depth can be a good thing until you have too much depth in a couple of areas and not enough depth in another. So the Cardinals have like 6 outfielders and DHs and utility players and like 2 pitchers, right, that you can really trust to go out there on a given day and perform for you. So I'm not sure. I think their versatility, the way that Ollie Marmol used the lineup in 2022, was a huge strength to the club. This year, I think it's been a huge detriment.
Real quick, one more follow-up, Katie. Are you concerned at all that they maybe lean too much to one side to where they're moving all these position players to open up logjam space and bring in more pitchers, and then the offense and the talent that they have currently is not there for next season?
Yeah, I think it's a very dangerous game to be playing, and it's a very thin line. One thing that we do like about the Cardinals this year is their offense is pretty dang good. And I think the biggest challenge John Mozeliak and the front office have, not just this trade deadline, but over the offseason, is how do you maximize the offense while creating space for players and making sure you're not trading away the majority of that offensive power. And I don't think there's a perfect solution to that. I think there's a reason why there's so much pressure on the Cardinals brass to start performing over the next week leading into the trade deadline and, of course, into the offseason. And there's no perfect blueprint. I don't know, and I don't know if you guys know either. I'm totally willing to listen. If I can look at the 40-man roster and plot out exactly who should stay and who should go and feel 100% confident about every single move.
No. There's no way to do it.
You can't.
You're going to have to make bets. And this is why I don't give the Cardinals as much criticism for the Marcell Ozuna trade as so many others do. They needed a cleanup hitter. And they went out and got who they believed to be the best guy available at the time. And he was. It was a big bet that they made. And they lost. And sometimes that happens. Meanwhile, the Randy Arozarena trade was not a move that they made because they had to. It was a move that they made because they wanted to for Matthew Liberatore. And they lost that one in a big way. And I think it has had like serious ramifications for years to come for them. So I give them much more crap for the Randy Arozarena deal than I do the Marcell Ozuna one, even though the Ozuna one, when you look at the pitching side of things, like that was the one that was more costly. But it was also a bet that was, I think, much more reasonable to make. And those are some of the bets that they're going to have to make going into this trade deadline and then certainly into the offseason as well.
Completely agree. I think you're spot on. And again, that's why these trades carry so much weight, because the Cardinals are in a dire need for pitching and they're in a dire need to compete for next year. They have to make some bets, and they can't afford to be wrong at this time.
Katie Wu is going to be following all of this for The Athletic. She's done excellent work for them. You should be following her on Twitter if you aren't already, at Katie J. Wu. That's where she'll send out all of her work. And, of course, you can just go over to The Athletic and read it there as well. She's done a number of pieces, one with the Dodgers, one with the Yankees over the last week or so with some trade packages that might make sense for both teams. Katie, we appreciate the time as always. This time next week, we'll be talking about this once again, as at that point, we'll be just 24 hours away, I think, or 48 hours, I guess, from the trade deadline. So we'll talk to you again about all of this stuff again next week.
You got it, guys. Looking forward to it. Have a great week.
Katie Wu joining us as she does each and every Monday here on 101 ESPN. By the way, she took the place of The Junk Drawer, which is normally brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri, dine in, carry out 7 days a week. Alex, I want to talk about that a little bit. What she mentioned there on Jordan Walker specifically, there is one way that you could convince yourself that it is actually smart to trade Paul Goldschmidt. And we'll discuss that next year on 101 ESPN.
Catch Wednesdays with Waino every week on the opening drive.
So if you missed it, we were just talking to Katie Wu of The Athletic. Be sure to find her work over on The Athletic, and you can find our full conversation on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. So she said, and I wanted to ask her this as a follow-up because I thought it was really important. Is she speculating or is she reporting? And she said, I'm speculating here, just kind of reading between the lines. She believes that Jordan Walker is 90% untouchable, which is to say he's incredibly unlikely to be traded either at the deadline or in the offseason. But the one way you could convince yourself, and I do to a degree understand what she's saying here, is you could say, you know what, there's really no spot for him at first base. There's no spot for him at third base. And he's been, and this is by the numbers, one of the worst defensive outfielders that we have ever seen since defensive metrics have become a thing. So what do you do there? You need pitching in a really bad way. Could you convince yourself that for the right price, like a Shane McClanahan, for example, you decide to trade, you do the unthinkable and you trade Jordan Walker to clear up your outfield mix? My answer to that would be a resounding hell no. I would not do that. I have been coming on the air for weeks now. We all have, Alex, and have been saying, you do not trade Paul Goldschmidt, because if you're trying to win in 2024, trading Goldie signals that you are done trying to win in 2024. This would be the one place where I would say there is one addendum to that discussion that I think probably needs to be had, and it's had right now. If you find yourself in a place where you say, in an honest moment, Jordan Walker is not an outfielder. He isn't now. He's not going to be in the future, and we know it. We are ready to make that decision today. The answer is not then to trade Jordan Walker. The answer is then to find his future position and open that up for him. And if you believe that position to be first base, that's how you can convince yourself that it's time to move on from Paul Goldschmidt. I would not do it. I would just run it back with Jordan Walker in the outfield. But again, if this is the way that the Cardinals see it, and we'll see, then that's how you convince yourself that Paul Goldschmidt is the guy that you should move on from, either this year at the deadline or in the offseason, because you cannot move on from Jordan Walker. This is the crown jewel of your organization from the last 15 years. You don't move on from that guy for anybody. He is the singular most untouchable asset in your organization right now. More so than Mo, more so than Ollie. The only other guy that is more untouchable than Jordan Walker currently in this organization is the owner. It's Bill DeWitt Jr., and then it's Jordan Walker in terms of the importance to this organization right now and for years to come. That dude can't go anywhere.
If you choose a 36-year-old who you have one more year left over a 22-year-old prospect, you as an organization have completely failed, and it's time to blow it up and rebuild, because your decision makings are so porous that you'll be at the bottom of Major League Baseball for a long time, which is why I don't believe they would do that. I would consider trading Paul Goldschmidt if the deal is right, if I believe Jordan Walker is not an outfielder. I think the Cardinals are desperate for outfielders right now, and they'll convince themselves that they can work with Jordan Walker and figure it out, and their best way to compete next year is to have Paul Goldschmidt at first and Jordan Walker at right field. But if we want to go down that path together, you absolutely trade Paul Goldschmidt, and you don't wait for the offseason. You trade him at the deadline, because that's going to be the best way for you to gain assets that are close to Major League Baseball ready so that they can play in 2024. And the other side of this is, I want at least 60 plus or 50 games, whatever you have left after the deadline, of Walker at first base. Because if I'm competing next year, that's fair. Walker needs to get the reps in. Because you could tell me until you're blue in the face that Walker's a much better first baseman or third baseman than he is the outfielder. Show me it at the Major League Baseball level and put him there for the rest of the season.
Honestly, if you wanted to do that, one other thing that I would consider the rest of this year, because it doesn't matter, like these games are done after the trade deadline. If you think that's his future and you'd have to convince these guys to do it, I would use him at first and third the rest of the year and just DH on those days Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt. Find out what he's best at.
Yeah.
Find out where he's comfortable. And again, all of this is under the assumption that the Cardinals have given up on Walker as an outfielder, which I do not believe. I do not think that is the case. I think that they view him as an outfielder for now and for the future. And if that is true, then all of the stuff that we just talked about is moot, and that's how I'm viewing it. I think the Cardinals are going to keep Paul Goldschmidt. They're going to keep Nolan Arenado, and they will keep Jordan Walker. And they will play first, third, and one of the corner outfield spots for this team in 2024. But again, operating under what Katie Wu just mentioned to us, that is the one and the only route to Paul Goldschmidt becoming available via trade.
Yeah, and I agree. That's the only way Goldie becomes available on the trade market is you decide that Walker is not an outfielder. My question to you guys is what happens if you say, Walker, let's do one more test run in the outfield, second half of this year and the beginning of next year. Does that impact Goldie's future at all? Not so much this year's deadline, but just his future in St. Louis as a whole.
So I'm giving the runway for Jordan Walker the rest of this season and the partial
You're
next year.
going next year as well.
And I'm using Goldschmidt, and I'm not trading him, and I'm keeping him.
You're keeping him.
I wouldn't do that. I need to make that decision now because my best return on assets of Paul Goldschmidt is either going to be at the deadline or at the offseason because the more you trade him into the middle of the season next year, the lesser value you're getting in return because it's a 37-year-old who's an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, you need to make this decision now.
You need to trade him by Tuesday next week.
And my answer is, again, I'm not moving either. I am building my organization, my team, around Goldie, Arenado, and Walker. And then I figure it out around them. I don't know what my second base situation looks like. I would be taking calls right now on Gorman and on Edman and on Donovan. And honestly, on Mason Wynn.
Did you just say Donovan?
Yes.
You can't say Donovan.
I need to find out what the value is of all of these guys. I wouldn't trade Donovan most likely. But if you can get Logan Gilbert for Brendan Donovan, I'm having the talk. I need to see what that looks like. We can at least, we can go on Tinder. I'm probably swiping right on Logan Gilbert. And if they swipe right on Brendan Donovan, I'm like, hey, we thinking about it? Like, you want to go out and get drinks?
Meet up? I traded for Logan Gilbert on MLB The Show yesterday for Paul DeYoung. Who says no?
You need to turn off the auto trade.
Oh, sorry.
Coming up next, Bob Nightengale wrote earlier today that based on his reporting, Willson Contreras is on the block. For real? We'll talk to him about it next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. Do you remember that childhood piggy bank that you had? All the satisfaction that you felt when you were finally able to reap the rewards of all of your diligent savings? Well, with Truehold, you can access your biggest piggy bank yet, your home's equity. You'll start enjoying that retirement that you're planning for right now without having to move. Here's how you do it. Truehold will buy your home for its best current value while it remains high, and you get to make all the cash now while you continue living in your home for as long as you'd like. Plus, Truehold will cover all the property taxes, insurance, repairs, and maintenance too. And since they pay your home's current value in cash, that money is yours to do whatever you'd like with. So start enjoying your home's equity while it still remains high by visiting Truehold.com, and you'll discover how much they'll buy your home for today based on its best current value and not what's coming. Call 1-855-300-9993 or visit Truehold.com for the smarter and faster way to cash out on your home's full value without having to move. That's 1-855-300-9993. Again, 1-855-300-9993 or visit Truehold.com.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals fell to the Cubs yesterday 7-2 as they dropped 3 of 4 in Chicago. And they started 3-game set at the Arizona Diamondbacks tonight. 8:40 will be first pitch, and Adam Waino will get the start for St. Louis. So be activated later on today from the IL coming off of his right shoulder injury. This Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Earlier today, Bob Nightengale wrote a piece for USA Today on the 10 biggest questions leading into this year's trade deadline. In that piece, he wrote that Willson Contreras is among the players that are on the block for the St. Louis Cardinals. Bob Nightengale joins us now via the 101 ESPN hotline. Bob, we appreciate the time as always, man. Let's start with that piece that you wrote earlier today. It's gained a lot of buzz, as I'm sure you've seen. Willson Contreras, is it your opinion that he is legitimately on the trade block for the St. Louis Cardinals?
Yeah, I mean, just only protect a few guys are trying to get this thing right. I mean, it's a disappointing season. I mean, just the fact he's available, I really don't see anybody taking him. I mean, that's a lot of money. So no, I mean, I'd be shocked if somebody traded for him. I mean, everybody sees the same thing the Cardinals do.
What do you think they would need to eat in terms of money to make it palatable?
I just think way too much money. I mean, I think you're talking about, maybe at least a third, if not half. I mean, I think it'd be a ton of money. Like I said, I can't see him being moved now. During the winter, possible. But like I said, I mean, everybody sees the same thing. The Cardinals need catching, and the Cardinals, don't have, room for him or, interest, or, obviously they're disappointed. Why not try to move him? But that being said, I just can't see someone buying the bullet here.
The hard part for all of this, Bob, with Willson is, like, this season not only has not gone well for him, but, man, the picture of it all, of how the name has kind of been dragged through the mud and he's gone back and forth. They like him, they don't like him. Not only would it be tough to trade that guy, but if you're not able to move him, how do you return with that same situation of the guy telling him that he's the starting catcher?
Well, I think, this off season, they got to really reassess and get everything ready for spring training and stuff, and get him in line, make sure that he studies things as well. Like, okay, here's our pitchers, here's our dude. We want you, almost like a quarterback. We want you studying this video and everything else. You're not calling the wrong pitches. You're not calling a pitch he doesn't throw. So just make sure that he's, much more studious and prepared, than he was, this past season.
Does that mean, Bob, that the Cardinals need to be aggressive sooner rather than later of figuring out what that rotation looks like for 2024 if they're going to go down that path with Willson?
Well, I mean, the sooner the better, but, free agency always drags on. Usually if you want someone and the guy is good, he's not signing until, January anyway, sometimes February. So, I mean, you like to be aggressive and get a guy early. But baseball's free agency has just, dragged on so long in recent years. So I'm not sure that's possible.
Bob Nightengale is our guest. You can read his work over at USA Today. He's joining us here on 101 ESPN. Bob, when you look at Willson Contreras and who he's been for the Cardinals this year, you talk to people around the league a lot. I'm sure during last year's free agency, you heard all of the good and the bad about why teams would and would not be interested in Willson Contreras in free agency. Are you surprised at all by who he's been for the Cardinals this year?
Not that surprised, just because, remember now, I mean, the Cubs spent the past year doing everything to try to trade him, and nobody wanted him. But finally, the Astros were thinking about it. They said, you know what, we don't want him coming in the middle of a pennant race here, not knowing our pitchers. Astros looked into him during the off season as a free agent. It wasn't like there was people knocking his door down in free agency. There was a little interest. I think people saw the same thing or heard the same thing for the Cubs. I mean, Cubs don't burn anybody else. He's their property, and they had zero interest in bringing him back.
So then how did the Cardinals get talked into, or how do they talk themselves in to giving him 5 years and $85 million, Bob? How did they make that kind of a mistake last offseason?
Well, I think they're desperate for catcher, with Molina gone. As the Cardinals and John Mozeliak have said over and over that they were really impressed with his meeting with them and that he wanted to be, develop his catching skills and not just become a hitter. It's too bad they didn't get the guy that they get with Sean Murphy. I don't think Atlanta gave up much at all to get him. And, Cleveland wanted him, Tampa wanted him. He was the prize guy. And I think it's like, okay, well, if we can't, get a guy trade like that, we'll get the best available free agent catcher. There just wasn't much out there.
Final thing that I've got on Contreras, Bob, you mentioned a little bit earlier about his preparation and what you've heard has gone wrong with that. You mentioned him calling the wrong pitch. I know that's something that Michael Kay had mentioned on a broadcast as well. Is it your understanding that really happened?
Nobody has told me, that happened. But, no one refuted that report either. Michael Kay was with the Cardinals over in London, so he's around a lot of Cardinal people. The only thing I've heard is that the pitchers, did not want him catching them. That's why they took the responsibility away. They were complaining that, he's not calling good games. So with that report, they was calling pitches that they didn't have. I believe it. I mean, why were the pitchers so upset with him, particularly that quickly?
Was there any other team, Bob, based on your understanding, that was interested last offseason in Willson Contreras as a catcher?
Houston was. He was going to be sharing the position with Maldonado, but Houston was definitely in the free agent market. So I didn't hear any other teams, but I'm sure if the teams that need catching, like Cleveland and Tampa, had to have interest. So I'm sure. I'm sure Houston probably would have offered at least a 3-4 year deal and kind of raise that thing up. But I know they were interested because they thought, hey, if he spends time around our catchers, our pitchers all spring, it'll work out. We just didn't want him as a trade candidate.
So, Bob, when it comes to the Cardinals, John Mozeliak has made it very clear that their intentions are to overhaul this pitching staff for 2024, and most likely that's going to have to be via free agency unless they're willing to make some blockbuster trades, whether it's Contreras or Mike Leake or Dexter Fowler. Mo doesn't have a really good track record of acquiring the right types of guys via free agency. Does that give you concern of his hope to overhaul this pitching staff for 2024?
No, not that. Everybody's got everybody makes mistakes, and he's got the great trades too. Paul Goldschmidt trade, certainly be the worst trade in Arizona Diamondbacks history. That's got to be one of the top 5 or 10 trades in Cardinal history. Same with Arenado. It's not like the mistakes obviously with Gallen and Alcantara. Those things happen with Rosarina, but you make moves like that. But no, I think we'll see what pitching they really are after. I don't think it'd be a Marcus Stroman. I don't see that. I could see a Lance Lynn coming back as a 4th, 5th starter type thing, just to bring that leadership back in there. But yeah, it's not a deep free agent class, by any means.
You don't think they'll be in on the top guys like a Blake Snell or a Luis Urias or anything like Julio Urias or anybody like that?
No, I think they'll be in on them. But, those guys are flawed. Blake Snell's finally, he walked 7 guys his last start, but he hasn't been nearly the pitcher he was in Tampa. And Urias is having the worst season of his career. And we'll see what the Dodgers do. If the Dodgers aren't showing a whole lot of interest, that raises a lot of red flags. I would think the Dodgers will still try to sign him. I don't think he'll sign with the Dodgers. But, yeah, those 2 guys you mentioned, probably the top of the class. but they both have a lot of flaws on that resume.
He's Bob Nightengale. You can read his work over at USA Today. That's where he had his piece earlier today on the 10 biggest questions leading into this year's trade deadline. Bob, we appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy yourself over the next week or so as we lead into the deadline. We'll talk with you again soon.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
You got it. That's Bob Nightengale joining us here on 101 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at @BNightingale is where you can find him. Alex, there was a few things there that I definitely wanted to react to. The biggest thing, though, I would say that the number one question that I wanted to ask Bob, based upon his piece that he wrote earlier today, was, is this real? Like, are the Cardinals just floating it out there? Hey, we're willing to listen on Willson Contreras, or does he actually think he's going to get traded at the deadline? And he said, quote, I can't see him being moved now. He then added, I could maybe see it in the offseason, but it would cost them, 50%, maybe even more of their salary retention. I don't think this is something the Cardinals are going to do. I just think it's something the Cardinals would like to do. I think if the Cardinals could get a get-out-of-jail-free card, like somebody was willing to just give them a player to be named later, and we're willing to take on the full Willson Contreras contract, I think the Cardinals would do it just to get out of the money and to say, we're going to start over at catcher with Ivan Herrera as our guy, and we're going to use the $17 million that we're currently paying Willson Contreras to a starter for next year. I think they would love to do that. I just don't think it's realistic.
I'd love to trade one of the Blues defensemen and get Nicholas Hague from Vegas, but it's not going to happen. Like, you'd love to move on from a mistake that you made, but guess what? In pro sports, when you make a mistake in terms of giving a player a long-term contract and a salary,
at least he's just got a no-trade clause.
Does he? Yep. That's good. Well, at least it's not a no movement, right?
Yeah,
at least he doesn't.
Sure.
At least he doesn't hold that over the organization's head. But you're not moving on from it. And frankly, anybody who wants to just get rid of him, just to get rid of him, you really want to pay a guy 50% of his salary for the remainder of this contract to go on another team and hit 25 home runs and hit somewhere between 275, because that's what he's going to do. Even if he stinks defensively, he is going to be a contributing bat to a successful team.
So this continues to go back to their outfield mix. Like, if you think he is just, hey, he's a guy that can catch once out of every 3 days. Okay, well, what are we doing the other two? The answer might be left field one day, DH the other. Like in a 3-game series, that's the way that you set it up. He's catching once, he's in the outfield once, and he's at DH once. Okay, cool. What are you doing with Carlson? What are you doing with O'Neill? What are you doing with Burleson? What about Walker? What about Nootbaar?
What about
Donovan? Like, there are so many other guys that fit into that mix that they have held on to so many players for so long. Now you're paying for all of it. And that's the situation that they have placed themselves in. Coming up next, we'll hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and I've got some exciting news for all of the men out there. Victory Men's Health has launched a new telehealth site. It's called Victory RX. You can go to it at victoryrx.com. That's victoryrx.com. You can get prescribed your ED medication right there. And guys, they have made this process super easy. You go to the site, you do your entire consult all via text. You don't have to go through 16 different portals and put your information in 100 different ways. Not anymore. Not with Victory Men's Health, not with victoryrx.com. You probably know the name. Victory Men's Health has already treated thousands of men in their standalone locations, and now they're giving men from all over easier access to that #1 selling ED medication. It's a chewable tablet. It's got active ingredients with both Viagra and Cialis. It's going to make sure that that dosage is 100% correct, so it's going to work the first time for you. Go to victoryrx.com. That's victoryrx.com. You'll go over there, get into their information, and you'll get that entire consult done all via text. victoryrx.com. Play hard.
prizes all season long. Space is limited. You can find all the details on how to sign up for Big League Impact's 2023 fantasy football season now at 101ESPN.com. They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Stewart's American Mortgage. Google the Bagel Loan, featuring 0 fees and 0 closing costs.
Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Hey, if you've missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you can go to find it. It is all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
If you go over there, you'll find our conversations that we had earlier today with both Bob Nightengale and Katie Wu. We will be joined by Jeremy Rutherford tomorrow to talk about the St. Louis Blues. Alex, let's finish up the show today by recapping once again what we saw from the Cardinals over the weekend. Man, I feel like that was if you had any hope from the winning streak, Friday night probably sucked it out of you. And if that didn't do it, the rest of the weekend did. The truth for the Cardinals has been very self-evident for really like 3 months now. The Cardinals just don't have the pitching to go on any kind of a sustained run. Even when their pitchers are doing better, and Michaelis, Flaherty, and Montgomery have been much better recently, the bullpen falls flat. And even when that starting pitching is just okay, then maybe your lineup goes flat. And now you're dealing with injuries in the lineup as well. It's just not a team that has any kind of a run going for it right now.
It's the comment that Doug Armstrong made multiple times last season about the Blues team. And once again, we're back to comparing the two because they're the exact same team. Doug Armstrong always talked about our highs were too high and our lows were too low. But the problem with our lows were we couldn't stop the snowball. 5-game winning streak. Welcome to the high being the ultimate high of, hey, this is as good as they've looked all season. What if they could get back into this? You know what your lows look like? A 3-game losing streak where your pitching just goes completely soft on you and you don't have the depth to get through it. Your highs are too high and your lows are too lows, and there's no in between for this team. And frankly, a playoff contending team in my eyes always knows how to level out those problems. And the Cardinals never figured that out this season, and they're still showcasing it.
Yeah, and their lows, that snowball, they can't stop it because they don't have the pitching, as BK said, and they don't have the guy they can turn to. That is the number one that I'm going to put you on my back, and we're going to stop this losing streak.
Contreras.
Yeah. Do you know who's
listed as the starter tonight?
I saw. I can confirm.
Captain Cardinal.
Not the guy.
It's Adam Wainwright. He's coming to the mound. He's coming to the rescue.
I don't feel good about that. Like, Monty's the guy that supposedly is the number one in this rotation.
No.
Give
me the intro. Captain Cardinal is here for duty.
Tanner, you should
I wish everybody saw that on YouTube.
Tanner thought it was Jack Flaherty for a while.
Yeah.
He's bleeping back.
All right, so Adam Wainwright on the mound tonight. What are you expecting to see? He's got 60 to 65 pitches is what the Cardinals say, so 50 probably. 2 innings?
Maybe.
I'll say 4.
What?
Yeah, I'm going to go optimistic.
How many runs?
5.
he ain't getting through 4 if he's giving up 5 earned runs. I think
0. Shutout.
I think he gives you 2 innings, gives up 3 earned runs. I think that's kind of the way that I'll look at this.
I think he goes 2. I think it's
I'm going to be optimistic with Adam Wainwright saying it's fixed.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 3 innings, 2 earned runs. One of them be 3 innings, 2 runs. One of them being unearned because we know this defense.
I go 2 1/3, 6 earned.
Motter gets a home run tonight.
Is he in the lineup tonight?
Oh my God!
Who else are they putting out there?
Yeah, who else is playing second base?
We do need his bat.
Half of your infielders can't throw right now.
Yeah. All right. Sure.
Richie Palacios is going to be recalled and
I'm getting a Motter jersey.
Looking forward to the fast lane. They've got you taken care of from 2 to 6. We'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. right here on 101 ESPN. Speaking of pitching, Adam Wainwright is here to save the day, ladies and gentlemen.